যদি সবাই ফিরে যায়, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায়, যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায়, তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। যদি আলো না ধরে, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে, যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে, তবে বজ্রানলে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা জলরে, আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা জলরে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো রে।
Hi guys, thank you for joining the live stream. So we hear freebies are an absolute necessity if you want to win elections in a democracy, or in India to be specific. And today our guest Shrayan, whom you all have seen many times on our podcast, this is kind of the first time he's coming on as a guest, although he was there in the Bengali podcast as well, the Bengali version of this very live stream, which is that guy. He's a research scholar in JU. He's got something to do with computer science or CSE, something like that. We will discuss all of that stuff today. But he has come up, he has made a ledger with the help of Claude and stuff, where it actually works like a website where you can clearly compare states who have given freebies, who haven't given freebies, when did they give freebies, what benefits did they get, are the benefits according to the conventional wisdom, which is freebies, give freebies, win elections. Freebies is equal to elections in India. And anytime you oppose freebies, the whichever party is in power in whichever state or in the center and is giving freebies, their supporters will come and tell you this is not feasible, because how will you win elections without freebies? First of all, that to begin with, that's kind of a retarded argument, because you are obviously saying that fiscal responsibility, your state going bankrupt, everyone being addicted to somebody else's money, none of that's really important. What's important is your party is in power. The weirder conversation starts between the two supporters of the same party, one of whom is opposed to freebies and one of whom is not, just because their party is in power at least. So what does that guy do, who is a supporter of that party but knows what a disastrously dangerous situation freebies are? Now, these days, people bring up USA as well. Shrayan Bhattacharya, the BJP state president of West Bengal, went to Shuman Chattopadhyay, the greatest living Bengali journalist, his podcast, and said that because Shuman Chattopadhyay is a very neoliberal guy. On culture, he's left of center. On economics, he's right of center. So he also hates freebies, and he brings that up with Shrayan Bhattacharya, and he says, so what, even USA does it. And Shuman Chattopadhyay says, what freebies does USA give? But of course, USA does give a lot of freebies, and it has social security. Well, it's their printing press, also known as the Mint, and their federal bank, Federal Reserve, which of course makes that possible. Can everybody do that? Now, that similar argument can appear for India as well. Let's say during Manmohan Singh's time, our GDP was smaller, our freebies was, I guess, proportionately smaller. I'm not sure if it was proportionately smaller or not. I'm just making an argument here. Even if it's more or if it's less, it does not matter here. But it was definitely not as high as today's freebies, right? So we have a larger GDP, therefore more freebies. The problem is with freebies, it's always one political party favoring somebody and trying to bring them up in the economic and status hierarchy. And how is that different from anything that's ever happened? Somebody or the other in power favors somebody or the other, some group or the other, and uh, therefore that group's life turns out to be better. Um, there are two kinds of ways to do this, favoring somebody. One of that is with pure discrimination, that yes, I will have certain stuff for the citizens of my kingdom or country, but it won't be for everybody. It will be for a specific group. That's called discrimination. And that discrimination is going on today with freebies or reservations. That's a different debate, of course. So if somebody or the other is going to get favored anyway, so why not just codify it into law and keep on giving freebies? Because at least somebody's life is getting accelerated today with organic economic growth and upliftment out of poverty and economic prosperity, etc., with free markets. That would take maybe another generation, or at least for that person, it would take another 5 years, 10 years maybe. And with the kind of poverty and absence of education in West Bengal, no skills, only uh, only productivity is if you had joined Trinamool's Gunda Brigade, etc., or you became a neta and stashed up thousands of crores in your under your carpet, etc. So, can today's poor do without freebies? And especially since even USA does freebies. So, when you ask for decolonized self-defense laws in India, the problem apparently is that USA does it and it's a problem for USA, therefore we can't do it. But since USA apparently does not have problems rising out of social security or the Great Society programs, etc., therefore let's do that. This time, if USA does something, it's great. Even though everywhere else there will be excuses of Western style capitalism affecting our brains, our colonized minds, and therefore us seemingly having arguments that are similar, suspiciously similar to some American intellectuals' ideas. Holy shit, how can that happen? Hello, Pranav. Just living away, USA has a Medicaid system, mass health program, and also food stamp culture that I'm not much aware of. Yes. And none of that is just free cash transfer. Shrayan is here. So, Shrayan, first introduce yourself and let's start the discussion of why freebies are not what they seem. Because we have heard freebies are necessary for electoral victories. You obviously have come up with some other conclusions and findings.
Okay. So, hello everyone. First things first, as you know, I am associated with this particular channel and the CSK Vanguard group as a member. Outside that, I am working as a research fellow at Jadavpur University, and I belong from a STEM background, obviously. So, I'm a BTech basically, who is now into research. Funnily, I had actually joined a while ago, but I actually forgot to enter the enter studio button. So I was sitting, hearing what was being said, and after a good 5 minutes, I realized, oh, I haven't yet joined, which is why nobody is able to add me. Okay, anyway, so today we are going to look at several things at a time through the ledger I have built, and I'll obviously introduce that. Before that, you'll have to become accustomed with certain, let's say, economic lingo, a few terms and jargons to better understand what is the actual financial state of this country, or more specifically, the different states of this country. Because the way we are going to look at it today is through the lens of the different states. The primary reason behind that is certain things are extremely difficult when it comes to achieving them through the center directly. And freebies in specific is one such thing which has to be tackled in a decentralized fashion through the states, because that is an easier way to go about it. If we are going to look at it from a central metric where we are going to look at every state equally, that would be an unfair comparison, or that would be an unfair way to look at things. And then it would go, or it would boil down to the same path of reservations, as to we complaining that the central government should remove reservations, but one some random remote village in some particular state will be having casteism. So that is not the optimum way to go about it. The optimum way would be to look at the necessary requirements of every state or every particular region, and to better understand why it evolved in that certain particular trajectory in relation to the policies and economic framework of that particular state. Now, just a moment. Very important here to point out certain things. Firstly, the ingrained sense of socialism in our entire economic policy. For example, in the last Bengali podcast we had on the similar topic, it did touch upon everything, but some things were obviously missed. So today we are going to also see that, where in the section which discusses the central government funds given to the states, we are going to discuss devolution at a greater, let's say, rate or at a greater extent, where we would see that simply devolution itself is fundamentally based on a socialist principle of equity, whereby poorer states are given a greater share of that central transfer and richer states are given a lesser share of the central transfer. Beyond that, we will have another part of, let's say, central transfers, which would obviously be the discretionary grants, where one can debate favoritism, but even there, it is much by and large decided, because the discretionary grants are basically things like midday meal scheme and the center's donation towards the midday meal scheme, or similar other schemes, every one of those which starts with Pradhan Mantri something Yojana. And the states must meet certain conditions set by the center to actually avail those funds. However, devolution is something which is fixed. It is discussed and decided by the Finance Commission based on what is the population of a state and how poorly they're performing. So any state which is performing poorly would get a greater share of that thing from the center, which would I mean, it's basically, so the entire system, you see, would actively incentivize incompetence and poverty. That is one thing that needs to be discussed. Secondly, we are also going to have a brief discussion about delimitation through the lens of this particular argument or the construct. The primary reason behind this being that obviously the central government apparently is on the verge of introducing the delimitation bill at the center. And if they are able to do so, this might be one of the most hefty parliament sessions that this particular government will at least have in the parliament anytime soon, because FCRA apparently is also incoming, and delimitation would essentially be, covered or merged with women empowerment bill. So I was not expecting they would be able to procure the numbers so soon, but the way things have gone and the kind of arrangements they have done, including a particular party from the south eventually sending its chief of staff to jail on the whims of the chief minister of the particular state. So either way, that might trigger them further to support the BJP in its outreach for delimitation. So let's start, I guess. We will first discuss a few jargons to better understand the parameters or metrics to actually judge how things are at the current state. And then we will move to the actual ledger. So I'll have to share my screen. Okay, so just give me 1 minute. I'll just...
Yeah. Abhay is saying feminism is great because it's done in the US. However, red pill coming to India is a limitation of the... Yeah. Guns are bad because it happens in USA, and freebies are good because it happens in USA.
Okay. So I hope the screen is available. Yeah. So let us look at the something most important metrics.
It is zoom in kore dish.
Jargon to understand how exactly we can interpret what goes on in our budgets. So basically, we can understand the entire framework of how our budget functions from just one rupee, where this one rupee can be taken as a representative token of the entire economy, and a particular percent of the rupee would be spent in a certain way, and the remaining percentage would be sent in a different way. So, first of all, let us become familiar with a particular term called revenue receipts. Now, revenue receipts is basically the sum total of the amount that the state governments get in their budget or they earn in their budget from different avenues. Firstly, would be their own receipts or their own tax that they have collected from the particular state in capacity of a state government, and the other part of the revenue receipt would be whatever they are getting from the central government. Now, this part that they're getting from the central government includes obviously the discretionary grants, as I said, which is for most central schemes. A part of the budget has to be given by the state government to make it function, and the remaining part comes from the center. As in the midday meal scheme, as you would know, that several of these states actually have the midday meal schemes where around 60% of the budget is allotted by the central government for buying, let's say, rations and stuff, and another 40% comes from the state government for maintaining logistics. There are several other schemes, for example, the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana or similar schemes, where the trend is the same. Then we get devolutions, which is basically some form of central taxes being shared with the state governments mandatorily, and it is absolutely legal and mandatory. And how is this devolution percentage decided is actually determined by something called the Finance Commission. They basically set up a different body every 5 years or so, whereas whereby they decide that which state is poor and which state is absolutely screwed in terms of their finances. So we are going to give them a greater share of that amount to help them maintain themselves, or to, let's say, take care of their huge, immense unemployed population. So the next part, okay, so basically that is the revenue receipt. It is the sum total of everything that the state is earning, either from the center or from its own citizens. The next part of the budget would be the REVEX, also called the revenue expenditure. Now, revenue expenditure is that part of your financial budget which has to be renewed year on year. It is basically the rupee that evaporates, in the sense that we are not building any permanent asset with it that would eventually retrieve itself in a matter of a couple of years, or let's say a decade, because nothing of this amount remains. Revenue expenditure is typically composed of things like salaries of government employees, the dearness allowance, which has been, by the way, increased by 20% in West Bengal. Then you have your pensions, interest, subsidies, and stuff. So basically, running costs. Now, the problem with revenue expenditure is that revenue expenditure has to be, let's say, increasing perennially all the time, simply because we do not offer that level of privatization. Secondly, the existing system incentivizes people to go for government jobs even now, although it has significantly reduced. And then obviously there will be certain sectors which the government would have to look after mandatorily. It cannot be privatized. So the entire functioning and the running cost of that particular portfolio or the particular sector per se would have to come under revenue expenditure. Now, what else comes under revenue expenditure is basically your freebies, which are introduced as social sector spendings. So we'll have a particular section in our ledger called social sector spendings, whereby we'll look at how several things masquerading as revenue expenditure are absolutely needless, and they are just a mask for political parties to have political gains through financial incentives. Now, the next section of the budget, or the next section of the let's say this ledger, would be capex. So imagine 1 rupee is your entire financial budget of the particular financial year. So if we say that the revenue expenditure is around 60%, so 60% of that 1 rupee, which would be 60 paisa, essentially goes behind your daily running costs and salaries and subsidies and stuff. And the remaining 40 paise come under capex. With this particular 40 paise, you actually build infrastructure. So as you can see, if I go to the previous ledger and come back, this is the rupee that does not evaporate. It in fact coagulates and builds something, which may be your roads and bridges and stuff, or any other infrastructure, for example, hospitals and schools as well. The entire purpose behind capex is that these amounts are permanent investments into the economy, because they build infrastructure year after year. they will actually return you some amount of your investment, or maybe the entire amount of your investment. Because let's say if a road is built and it becomes a part of an economic corridor, and the economy, let's say, booms and people make a lot of profit from it, that would eventually go back into the economy, and it would become a zero sum game, or eventually even a positive sum game, where you have a net profit by building this infrastructure in the long run. In some cases, whatever is spent in the capex actually gets retrieved very fast, because the economy has reached that particular boom or particular threshold, beyond which it is very easy to recover anything that we invest into the system. In some cases, it pays off only after a decade, let's say, if your state is particularly deindustrialized. Next are the two most important things, called revenue deficit and fiscal deficit. Now, these two are the terms that are most heard in most of the economic discussion cycles, and we will not get into great depths of it, but at a fundamental stage, we will understand what revenue deficit and fiscal deficit would mean. Now, mostly the term that is more plaguingly heard in news channels and discussions on economic forums is fiscal deficit, although the more concerning thing after all is revenue deficit. So, revenue deficit basically means that you are having to borrow something from somebody to meet your day-to-day needs. For example, you will simply have to seek money from the central government, the RBI, or anybody else, because you are unable to pay your government job employees, or you are unable to pay your subsidies. Now, these are not permanent investments by the state, right? This have to be renewed at every financial year or the beginning of every financial year. तो आप ये भी नहीं दे पा रहे हैं, तो इसका मतलब बेसिकली आपका इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर बिल्डिंग, कैपिटल इन्वेस्टमेंट्स तो आप छोड़ ही दीजिए, आपके पास खाने के पैसे नहीं है. अंडरस्टैंड एज बेसिकली दिस कि आप इतने ही गरीब भिखारी हो चुके हैं कि आपके पास खाने के पैसे नहीं है, डे टू डे बेसिस के खाने वगैरह के लिए भी आपको उधार लेना पड़ता है. दैट वुड मीन रेवेन्यू डेफिसिट. West Bengal, for example, has been in a revenue deficit for the past 21 years, every single year. Gujarat, for example, has almost never been a revenue deficit. Then there are things like fiscal. There's a thing called fiscal deficit. Now, fiscal deficit may not be mandatorily bad, particularly at the inflection point of a state's economic journey. For example, it might be that due to the already existing economic policies of a certain state, it has become extremely poor and has removed its focus from infrastructure building. Now, naturally, when that happens, you would have to understand that a particular state would be plagued with lots of freebies or other kinds of promises, which are predetermined and they are fixed. So you cannot basically move away from them without losing or not being able to win elections. Uttar Pradesh, for example, is a great example, scenario or an anecdote of fiscal deficit, whereby the existing policies of the previous regimes were such that almost all of your money would basically go behind freebies and such things. So what do you do to actually build infrastructure at a greater speed? So the entire concept is that, okay, you meet your revenue expenditure through your own budget or whatever revenue you're earning. You look after the salaries and tax tax subsidies and everything given to farmers, and then you borrow additional money from other people to simply build your infrastructure. So here also you are in a deficit. That is to say that your total income is far less than your total expenditure, but the debt that you have actually taken, you are using it not to distribute it to most people in terms of salaries and stuff, but you're building permanent capital assets with it, which in the long run would help the economy to boom, and it will be brought back into the track, whereby it will be a balanced game. So fiscal deficit obviously might not be the greatest thing that there is around, but you have to understand in certain states, to actually change the ongoing loop of how things are, you have to go for a fiscal deficit. Revenue deficit, on the other hand, is the extremely robust measure of a state that is going bankrupt. Yeah, so this basically summarizes it, that not all borrowing is a sin. Some borrowing can be useful too if you're actually borrowing to. Revenue deficit is when you're borrowing to burn, which is an absolute waste of your resources.
So, and how true is the notion in Tamil Nadu that delimitation practically means robbing them off or ripping them off?
Well, Coming to it, okay, so I may just
That's
come back to this.
that I guess they say in terms of population to be specific and TFR in terms of delimitation, but they have grievances against the center and northern India for gobbling up and using up all their revenue as well.
Yes, now that is what we had to discuss today as well. So definitely, it is a legitimate grievance from the southern states, because the southern states are richer in the way that their population compared to their total economy is much higher, so their gross domestic product would be higher than most of the North Indian states. But then what we have to see is eventually their seats were proportionately increasing even under the previous bill that was proposed, or the previous version of the delimitation bill. It was a proportionate increase. In fact, if anything, they were increasing in seats more than the northern counterparts. So that was sorted. Now, after a few months, let's say when the elections have happened and the DMK, for example, has lost, and they're apparently in support of the delimitation, that is the rumor in several circles. Even then, their queries regarding a proportionate increase in seats have been made, whereby they will not have to suffer any electoral capital at the center. So they will have their incentives in terms of a political party. But the greater point is the major argument that was being made by the southern states, for example, Tamil Nadu, that it will eventually benefit a group of people who do not want to industrialize, or who are suffering, or who are, let's say, enjoying at the expense of the middle class or the
That
urban
almost
middle
seems
class.
very fair, right? That's a fair
It
assessment, right?
seems, yeah, it seems fair, but once again, this argument actually percolates into the discourse only when it involves party politics of several states. My greater point is,
Yeah.
what about the dynamics inside the state? There too, a particular section of your economy do not want to industrialize, want to remain by the norms of, let's say, 1950s and stuff. And then if, and they'll always be higher in population than the urban middle class, because in villages you see the TFR has been consistently higher. In the urban sectors it has been crashing almost, right? So if that is the basis of delimitation, and you are going to increase the seats of people based on population to increase the quality of management, which is basically what every single IT cell page of the BJP is advertising, that आपके पास ज़्यादा MP होंगे तो आपको per capita ज़्यादा ध्यान मिलेगा आपके politicians से, and you will develop. Now my simple query or my simple question is, okay, is that the only reason that they are lagging behind? If that is the only reason that they're lagging behind, then you basically increase the seats of the rural centers in name of integral humanism and in the garb of altruistic development. What would happen is you will end up giving them a lot more economic incentives, where they will have more seats under their control. And then what? Then what if they start asking for freebies? And you will have to give them. Then retrospectively, you are creating new avenues of learned helplessness, whereby you will then be saying, after let's say 3 or 5 years, कि नहीं नहीं देना तो पड़ेगा वरना elections हार जाएंगे, which is exactly the argument you use for every single thing. Now imagine a situation where you go for let's say some form of weird delimitation in Punjab, whereby the rural agricultural sector of Punjab actually gets a lot more seats. And then anytime you want to bring in agricultural reforms, you will face a backlash from the same people who oppose the farm bill. उसके बाद क्या आप नहीं करेंगे वो चीजें? You will stop all the reforms simply because आपको जनता का जनादेश स्वीकार करना है. So my entire argument is that any time a deindustrialized population would be given greater economic incentives in terms of greater seat share, they will definitely leverage it to get their demands accepted by the state government.
And
But
their
where does
demands
the
are just
private-
freebies, not more industry. If the demand was, in fact, no, I want a cement
Yes,
factory in my neighborhood, that would not be a problem.
exactly. In which case, that would be the gold standard of scenarios, and we would have no thing to discuss in the first place. But if they do not go that, and simply they have a greater, let's say, seat share, any political party will have to listen to this demand that has been raised. So in that case, who bears the brunt of that extra baggage of, let's say, revenues that we have to face? It would be urban middle class. So it would go further into that cycle or loop of incentivizing incompetence instead of incentivizing competence. And that would be one of the major discussions that we will have even for the ledger, But we would see that since devolutions have been entirely based on the premise that we are going to incentivize the incompetent by helping them with your integral humanism based ideas and uplifting them,
Hmm.
should
But
there
Shrayan,
not be, yeah,
that's where Abhay's argument comes in, which is not factually incorrect that a lot of rural areas are urbanizing and the rural population is moving to the cities in hordes, which is happening because of the freebies being, let's say, all the monetary expenditures in places like North India from the taxes of South India. Uh, but then, therefore, integral humanism seems to be working, right? Then what's your problem?
okay, so that's the thing. If that is the argument, are you actually tracking that? If that is indeed the case, then I have no problems with it and no qualms with it. But you do not have any safety valve to assure that is what is happening. So if you have the resources or capacity to track basically almost everything that is going on around the planet, आप इसको भी करके देख लीजिए. That is the fundament. That is the even fundamental question that arises. Na, that these people do not want to actually share those data. What is your problem to be transparent and actually share those data points so that citizens can have better informed decisions? वो तो आप नहीं करेंगे. Now, if you are not sharing that data, why are you not sharing that data? Because you know something weird is happening over there which you do not want to come to the surface. How is it that you're managing your rural sectors so well that you are basically, and it's not just about the BJP, understand, anybody who comes to power in a particular state subsequently remains in power because the rural vote bank keeps voting for them. That was the same exact same case in West Bengal as well. So isn't it a bit peculiar that anytime you come to power, you simply backtrack on every single thing you wanted as an opposition, and a particular sector keeps supporting you disproportionately because of welfare schemes, and you are still questioning as to अच्छा यहाँ पे कुछ गड़बड़ तो नहीं लग रहा. It's simply odd. And if all these people actually and understand what do you exactly mean by इनको ये economic stimulation मिलेगा और ये शहरों में आ जाएंगे. अरे इतने शहर कहाँ है आपके पास कि सब गांव के लोग यहाँ पे आके रहने लगेंगे. That is exactly the problem, na. That is exactly the problem, that the development that is happening as well is disproportionate. It's not happening overall. So basically you cannot, this cannot be a way to urbanize कि जितने भी गांव के लोग हैं उनको आप urban centers में भेज दीजिए and becomes a hell lot of population and गांव सारी खाली हो जाएंगे पर जमीनें वहीं पे रहेंगी. तो आपके बाप दादा की पुश्तैनी जमीन आप रख लेंगे अपने पास सरकार को कभी किसी दिन पे बेचने के लिए, बट यहाँ के रहेंगे यहाँ पे. That is exactly what would give rise to greater slums.
Yeah, and of course, China-like living conditions as well for
Yeah.
the lower middle class and lower class. Now, a lot of leftists, not every leftist, a lot of leftists would argue that therefore democracy is a good thing because democracy is working in this case for people who have no other voice. Therefore, I think they would argue that it's an inbuilt implicit beauty of democracy that every party has to remain in power by the consent of the village population who have no say or voice otherwise in the matters of state or policy, although they are the only ones who have a voice. So if the premise is that they don't have a voice, so let democracy benefit them, then what is democracy and the Indian democracy and the Indian state saying to people like you and me, Shrayan? Then is it saying to us that it's kind of a given that you all will go ahead, get ahead because of contacts and maybe corruption and contacts to do greater corruption? A poorer guy with no contacts will do corruption for 100 rupees, you will do for 100 crores. So do that. The democracy will take care of the poor. You do your thing with all the corrupt routes.
It is not saying anything. It is basically saying that we are and we have been a banana republic and we are going to be that. So my simple counter question to all leftists who raise this point is, then you should not be having any problem with Hindu consolidation or Hindu vote bank consolidation as well, because that is happening on the exact same premise. ठीक है, करो फिर. Are you going to go about that path? You are simply saying that नहीं religion को इसमें मत घुसाओ. What is the problem with that if that is the way things are? Hindus are 80% or let's say 70% of the population,
So
and they have every
group
right to
identity,
exercise their rights. Yeah, so
collectivism is cool only on the basis of economics.
Yes. So essentially, it boils down to a discussion of group identity. Now, the group identity is wrong when it becomes the basis of cultural norms or signatures, but it is right when it becomes the basis of electoral or say financial norms. तो वहाँ पे उसके बाद आप कभी तो जेंडर नॉर्म्स भी लाओगे. उसके बाद कभी तो ये डिस्कशन भी चालू होना होगा कि इज देयर एन ओवरलैप बिटवीन दिस डिफरेंट नॉर्म्स. Are there particular religious, let's say, groups which actually are better citizens and give better taxes? उस discussion में भी जाएंगे कभी. Then at some point, someone might eventually say, ki, okay, so overall, the male gender is earning more than the female gender in most sectors. So they should be incentivized. Is that a discussion we are going to go into? Or should
That's
we
the
go into all those permutation
gender
combinations
gap.
whereby, yeah. So then
That happens
gender
because
gap
of the
is
gender wage gap and patriarchy. And the fact that
but-
some groups are better taxpayers today and better citizens today, that's happening because of historical privileges, of course.
So that is my primary question. You are trying to bring about equity in society at the expense of whom? You want to uplift somebody, the entire stage is relative, na? The only way that the entire stage does not remain relative is capitalism, whereby you create more wealth and everyone gets uplifted in the status quo position. If you are going to do this, then essentially you are actively also, let's say, campaigning against somebody.
Yeah.
And every
Somebody's
time you
progress
come
has
up
to
with
be halted.
yes, halt, not just halted, by force pulled backwards to uplift somebody else. That is exactly what is happening now.
Yeah.
Now, my simple question is, every single leftist that claims that is eventually from an urban center. So you will be one of
That's
those
why
people whose tax will be taken away, and you have no problem with it because you basically do nothing. You basically live off the scholarships and stuff of other people who actively incentivize you to do bullshit. But there are people who legitimately earn their bread and butter and run their families. Who has given you that authority to determine how they are going to? But that has always been my argument. Hey, तुम्हें देना है पैसे गरीबों को, तुम जाके अपना शौक का गिटार बेच दो, तुम जाके अपने शौक की गाड़ी बेच दो. गाड़ी बेच दिया, बट कोई एक तो ऐसा बंदा होगा ना जो झोपड़पट्टी में रहता है. गाड़ी तो उसके पास भी नहीं है, तुम्हारे पास भी नहीं है, पर वो झोपड़पट्टी में रहता है, तुम 2 माले की बिल्डिंग में रहते हो, तो तुम पहले अपनी 2 माले का बिल्डिंग बेचो और उसके साथ झोपड़पट्टी में जाके रहो, उसके बाद तुम ज्ञान देना.
this is like upper castes letting go of their surnames and thinking they are big anti-caste activists now. All of your cultural capital for generations went away because you ignored your surname, bro. Let's get into the interstate comparisons,
Yeah.
which is the most insane part of this ledger.
Yeah. So okay.
Are you done with the terms?
Yeah, I'm done with the terms, and
Okay.
I'll now be sharing the actual ledger. Yeah. So basically, we'll be covering a few states mandatorily to put across certain points I want to make, and then we'll move into certain other states which we had not discussed on the last day, as in how much time permits. So let me make you understand or make you familiarized with the basic premise of how this ledger has been built. What are the different sections? So you will have something called a state explorer, where you can basically surf all the different states that there are, all the 26 states. And you will have two, let's say, buttons or two facilities where you can actually directly compare head-to-head two metrics. One would be the primary metric, another additional secondary metric would also be there for you to compare. Now, there are several things included under primary metric. For example, you will have things like factory NFCF, and also factory NFCF on a Z-score basis. You will have capex share of budget. You will have capital outlay in terms of raw money or crores. You will have capital outlay growth percentage. So capital outlay growth percentage basically means how much of the economy or how much of the budget was actually put behind capital expenditure year on year. So what was the growth of capital expenditure every year, year by year. Similarly, you will have revenue expenditure growth percentage, and then you will have revenue deficit percentage, and then you will have something very interesting called social sector expenditure growth, which is basically everything freebies are masquerading as integral humanism. And on the secondary axis or the second comparative button, you will have all these same parameters. So you can basically head-to-head do a head-to-head comparison of two of the nearest metrics. For example, you can go about doing a comparison of what is the revenue deficit in a particular state compared to capital outlay to understand that जब revenue deficit बढ़ता है, Is it that the capital outlay is reducing? Because if that is the case, then basically it would mean that you are not even into Keynesianism, and you're basically spending everything that you have in terms of redistribution kind of policies. Or
Yeah,
you can
people are
actually
clear
take a
on the terms here, right? Capital outlay means the stuff that's actually used for keeping up the recurring costs, right? That's capital outlay.
capital outlay is the amount spent to actually build new infrastructure. The raw amount
Oh, so the
that is
opposite of
going
what I
behind,
said.
yeah,
Yeah.
what is going behind capital expenditure.
Hmm.
Capital outlay growth
Yeah.
percentage is obviously the year-on increment in that capex share that is being allotted to states. Capital revenue expenditure growth percentage is obviously the same thing for revex. So how much is revenue growing year on year? And this would have to be to a great extent intuitive, simply because your revex will always be forever growing unless you do some insane amounts of privatization, because your population is growing. So the population and stakeholders are growing, and basically your salaries would also be growing according to the norms of let's say
Inflation
simply
and DA.
increment in salaries and stuff. Yeah, EPFO and everything basically. So then anytime you have revisions in salaries and stuff, they will always be ever growing. Revenue deficit obviously we have discussed, and social sector expenditure growth we are going to look at great details as well. Okay, factory NFCF that we discussed at length even in the last Bengali podcast was, and that needs to be said, it is basically the amount of private investments made in every state which is directly used for manufacturing hardcore factories. So basically, capital infrastructure development of the private sector. Very tangible, one that would stay. Basically, anytime you set up a factory, which is going to stay for the next 10-15 years without even significant upgradations, and people would be working over there. So that would have to be a measure, simply because we will see how certain things such as investor confidence are varying in state to state. All right. So that the second section would be an election event study, where basically we will see the freebie signature. We will try to visualize it through a graph and find out in a 5-year electoral cycle which part of the cycle is actually the time when freebies have the worst impact on the economy. So is it before elections, during elections, or after elections? And we will have some of the most prominent parties of India, not all. For example, there are certain parties like DMK and stuff which has to be still incorporated, and I have been extremely busy actually for the past few days, so I have not been able to do that, but we will get it done. Then there will be a part 2 head-to-head, where basically every single political party that we know of, except maybe some extremely small parties or regional parties, are there, and we will have several parameters to compare how they have performed in terms of their states, capex share on an average, revex growth percentage, and their private investments under those political parties' regimes. Then we'll have something called a freebie signature, where basically the elections that have taken place, the state elections that have taken place in the last, let's say, 20 odd years, we are going to take an analysis of those elections based on the particular quadrants. You can see 4 quadrants over here. Every particular quadrant is indicative of something. So the y-axis, for example, you have capex share, and the x-axis you have revex growth. So naturally, when you look at those in 4 quadrants, you will have an idea of what this means. So places where the revenue expenditure has not grown and the capital expenditure has grown. So capital investments have grown mean greater amounts of capital infrastructure development, and revenue expenditure being significantly less means lesser freebies. So at lesser freebies and more capital infrastructure, how many incumbents have actually won their elections and come back? This quadrant would be indicative of that. This would be when both have been done in a, let's say, fair share, where there has been freebies as well as capital infrastructure development, which basically we can call development. Because anytime people mean development, mostly it is about the infrastructural development per se. The particular third quadrant at the bottom left would be places where simply people have used status quo good governance to come back, क्योंकि यहाँ पे there was no significant increase in freebies as well, and no significant increase in capital expenditure as well. And the particular quadrant over here, which is the first quadrant, is the worst case scenario जहाँ पे कुछ भी आपने डेवलपमेंट तो नहीं किया, कैपिटल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेवलपमेंट नहीं किया, फ्रीबीज के भरोसे ही आप वापस आए. And we will understand all the other symbols as well. So for example, basically on clicking you will find out which political party is it. So obviously saffron would be for BJP, then red would be for communists or the CPIM per se in West Bengal and Kerala. So we can go look at that will be there, and we'll come back to this. And obviously we actually excluded the COVID window elections because many people would say that us dauran to people had to take care of their citizens and stuff. So we are not going to get into that thing, although we can. So if you simply click this button, you can actually take a look at the elections that were held during COVID as well, or during that particular window of 19 to 21 or 22 as well. The most interesting segment obviously would be this, which is the portfolio split. Now this basically takes into consideration every state based on the several portfolios, or the major portfolios at least, that they hold. So there will be education, health, water and sanitation, housing and urban development, agriculture and allied sectors, rural development, irrigation and flood, energy, industry and minerals, and roads and bridges. Okay. Now we'll be comparing the several portfolios on the basis of three things: revenue expenditure, capital expenditure, and capital expenditure percentage. So here actually we are going to see the raw amounts that were being used behind these portfolios for RevEx and CapEx, so that we can have an easier comparison, or we can interpret things better. So for example, in any particular given year, in particular sector, in a particular state, around let's say 36,000 crores were spent on revenue, so to give salaries of people and stuff, and only 224 crores were actually spent on developing infrastructure. So we are going to discuss this at length as well, and in fact this would be the main section that we'll have to discuss at great length, except the first sector, which is the state explorer. Okay. And on the other, or the right hand side of the axis, you will have another axis basically, which will give you the capex intensity percentage. So whether it is 0.5% or 3.5%. Now in some places, for some states, you will see that the index or the axis on the right hand side is far more spread. So for here example, in West Bengal, it is only obvious it is increasing by 0.5. But in developed states like just a moment. Okay, so I guess this should be better visible. So this entire axis would be increasing by a scaling factor of 0.5. So after 0.5, it is 1, 1.5, 2.0. In certain states or in certain particular portfolios, you might see that this is increasing far more. So the gap would be higher. So maybe it would be 5% and then 10% and then 20%, which means that in this particular portfolio, you actually invest far more for capital development than for status quo maintenance. Those things would be there, and we'll discuss them one by one. So the left would be the axis for a direct head-to-head comparison of the revenue amount versus the capital expenditure amount, and the right would be for capital expenditure percentage. And obviously the most interesting thing that there is these colored bands, which basically tell you the electoral cycle, or in which year elections were held in this particular state, and in retrospection to that, if the incumbent came back or not, and which parties were in power when the state was performing in a certain fashion in a particular portfolio. Then we'll have this another section called the Delhi Rupee, where basically we'll see that how much of Kendra Bonchona actually most of the states face, where we will have 4 metrics. The yellow line indicating central transfers, of which the violet line will be indicating of the devolution, or the legitimate amount of central taxes that the states are going to get or should get in shares based on the principles of socialism and integral humanism of incentivizing the incompetent. Then we will have the pink line, which is basically discretionary grants, as we have discussed, and the white line would be the revenue of that particular state earned from the citizens of that particular state by the legitimate state government. So these are the several sectors, and then we'll have interesting margin notes wherever necessary to discuss that what are the particular sectors a state has excelled in, and what are the sectors they have performed the worst in maybe, and any other interesting tidbits that arise as and when. So let us start by the State Explorer itself, and we will take a quick look at certain states and certain parameters. So since we are based in West Bengal, so we'll start with West Bengal, and it is also pertinent because it will basically then cover you through the things in a narrative fashion or in a story like fashion, from the worst case scenario of how not to do things to the best case scenario of how things could or should be done. So if you take a look at West Bengal, and right now we are going to look at just one metric. We are not going to do a head-to-head comparison because that would be needlessly complicated. So we'll simply go for a capital outlay in crores, and we are going to put the second parameter as invalid or inactive right now. And you can simply see this capital outlay is basically based on the sum total of all the portfolios. Okay, so this is basically the signature of how much capital infrastructure development was spent behind in the state of West Bengal in the past 20 years. And it has always been pretty low. So you can imagine, even at its definitive peak, it was lower than the 25,000 crore mark. So at any particular given year, the highest that was spent behind capital infrastructure development across all portfolios was 25,000 crores. Okay. And the last thing that needs to be mentioned is that all of these data has been actually derived from the CAG reports, the reports by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, and it has been published in the RBI site. Most of it is organized, some of it is not organized. It is spread across several websites. So I have collected all of those, them, and partly through vibe coding and certain optimizations through hard coding, I've actually built this ledger. So you will not have definitive final data from 2022 onwards, simply because the stage report has not yet confirmed the figures of these years. What happens is that certain keeps getting revised, and after only 2 to 3 years you get the solid numbers without any kind of malpractices. And it is also necessary to mention that CAG is extremely dignified and impartial. It may come under the central government, does not mean it favors any party, because it keeps flagging even the BJP every now and then for surplus expenditure or expenses which are not valid. Okay. So let us look at the state of West Bengal in terms of capital outlay. Obviously, it was extremely less during the years of the left, and then it increased somewhat comparatively during the initial years of TMC, spiked somewhere around 2018-19 and then dipped forever and then never really rose. In the next cycle that it actually rose, the CAG was flagging the government of West Bengal left and right for actually using these amounts of money for capital infrastructure development when those things were not ever developed actually. So most of these amounts have been diverted to other places in names of, let's say, electoral funding or whatsoever. Now, there's something that needs to be understood other than this as well. There are two kinds of expenditure, RevEx and CapEx. Understand, revenue expenditure is basically fixed, which is to say that you cannot really take away a part of the revenue expenditure for any kind of malpractices simply because that belongs to somebody. Somebody is an active stakeholder of that money. So if you try to do some form of scam or corruption with the revenue expenditure of a state, you will be almost immediately flagged because some person will bring it up to the media and then it will be a fuss, or they can actually move to the courts for swifter justice. Even though there will be some shameless political parties who would take away or steal even from this, and then you will have large-scale protest of teachers and stuff sitting behind the secretariat and doing things. The second kind of budget is the CapEx, or the capital expenditure, and there is one section from where mostly corruptions happen, simply because you cannot always, as a normal citizen, quantify as to what should be the standard of infrastructure based on a budget. So यहाँ पे say if a certain amount is actually taken away for all kinds of malpractices, and even after that the promised infrastructure is built, but at a lesser quality, you as a normal citizen will always not be able to flag it simply because of your ignorance. You will not have awareness of that depth of details, and therefore. So now let us move to the next metrics, which is the capital outlay growth percentage. So year on year, how did capital outlay actually increase in the state of West Bengal? And you will see no
What kind
fixed
of a
trend.
graph is this? This shows that it's a government without a vision. It's so random. Whatever, whenever the time calls for, the situation calls for, their vision shifts and meanders according to that. What is this graph? Nobody would take this graph seriously for anything like shares and stuff. They would call it too volatile and unpredictable and then pointless, indisciplined, etc.
Yes, they will call it volatile and unpredictable, but see, there are certain particular inflection points, and those inflection points are based on the particular years in which the state elections took place. So for example, this particular inflection point is the 2011 elections. The second inflection point where it basically kept going down, and the final point after which it went further down is the 2016 elections. And the only spike that we saw was under 2016 elections. So one might understand that there is no fixed trend or vision, but there is indeed some sense in this entire graph.
Yeah,
But
right after winning
right,
elections, they do some
yes,
capital outlay.
but on the basis of electoral performance and not on the basis of developmental agenda. So one would understand this, that before the 2011 elections, when the CPIM finally lost after their 34-year stint, the capital outlay growth has gone south. So basically, you can look at it over here and you will find it recurring in almost every state. Anytime a particular incumbent party or a particular party knows that they're about to lose elections is when they actually opt for greater freebies. When they opt for greater freebies, the revenue expenditure increases and the revenue or the capital expenditure goes down. But anytime a particular political party is confident of coming back to power, the reliance on freebies is much lesser. In fact, in states where the capital or the political party is confident of coming back to power, they actually spike the capital expenditure before elections to get certain infrastructural projects completed. And on the basis of that wave, they actually win those elections. So that is there. Now you can understand simply from the fact that the CPI was extremely withered away due to the things that Mamata Banerjee did in 2007, that they had significantly resorted to actually some form of freeze and the capital expenditure fell. After the 2011 win, which was a magnanimous or the mammoth win, basically, there was a lot of confidence in the environment and people had desired change. So naturally, you would see the capital expenditure graph actually spiked. And there was a capital outlay growth for the next 2 years. And this is basically also the period when there was a complete overhaul of the road infrastructure of West Bengal. So the only great thing that actually the TNC had done after coming to power was insane amount of roads were built. Simply, if you would go from Kolkata or any other place to places like Digha and stuff, it was extremely bad when I was young. I remember particularly. And then after three, four
Yes,
years of them coming to where we would go, those roads would be like smooth as hell. So
yes,
that is that. Then 2012 and 13, it basically became a little less, and that also is explained well because remember 2014-15 was the time when the Lok Sabha elections took place, and even though that the BJP was basically signaling the TMC to come into an alliance with them, Mamata Banerjee, for her own personal ego reasons, basically refused and went into this competitive spree against the BJP to reserve West Bengal for themselves. And naturally, therefore, before the Lok Sabha elections, they had to rely on some form of freebies or financial incentives to the poor to solidify their vote bank. Now, anytime such promises are met, or anytime such promises are made, or such schemes are introduced, the next 2 to 3 years are particularly bad for the finances of that state because you go down and down to keep the electoral promise you had made. So naturally, after 2014, you would see there was a consistent dip for a long, long time. And despite that, they won the 2016 elections, after which it went even lesser because simply because they had set up the freebies during 2014 elections and they won the 2016 state elections. So they were in a pretty comfortable position. And then they felt there was no need for course correction, so they actually went for a further dip. But then you would again notice that 2017-18 was the time when questions had started being raised on the state government because the economy was basically going nuts and bolts and falling apart, and there were no jobs and stuff. So exactly before the 2019 Lok Sabha elections, there was a huge infrastructure push, which is very notable actually in the Bengal context. Everyone who follows it or has been following politics from that time knew that there was this infrastructure push indeed during the 2019 elections or before the 2019 elections. So you would see there are two bases of inflection points in most states. One is according to the state election, and the second according to the the Lok Sabha elections. Now, what is interesting to note is any time a state is ruled by regional parties, this inflection or this change in trends is much higher in frequency, simply because you have limited funds, and with that funds you need to manage both your state elections and your Lok Sabha elections. So you are basically switching behind which policy to follow and when. This trend of inflections in frequency is much lower when there are central parties ruling a particular state, like let's say the BJP or the Congress, simply because you are a national party, you have a better fund management, and you know how to drive yourself through elections without changing frequently your state's policies. So that would actually make a greater argument as to whether now we should actually give away or do away with regional politics and have a bipartisan electoral system where there will be two parties, so that their vision, their agenda is much more consistent irrespective of the electoral cycle. Now, after 2019, what actually had happened was, and from those who are West Bengal,
So, Shrayan,
yeah.
this Trinamool capital outlay peak at 2018.
Yeah.
What did they spend it on? Because at least in the previous peak, everybody saw it with their own eyes that the roads were top notch all across Bengal up until 2015-16. What's this peak for 2018? Where did they spend it?
Nobody really knows. A group of people allege that
this is probably them showing that we have spent this amount of money on a particular road, but 50% of them going to some politician's pocket, right? 50-80%.
Yeah, now see, 2017-18 was popular for two things. Firstly, because there was this push and the financial condition had already become pretty stagnant. That was one thing. Secondly, that was the time when several massive corruption things also happened. And those was the time when a lot of prominent political leaders were actually being speculated to be sent to jail. Those things were there. And in most of the cases, what happened was that already there were roads and stuffs built which had withered away the past 7-8 years. So a large amount of money was diverted to those roads to simply fix them or actually temporarily patch them up before the elections. And that too was cited as capital investment, which is not. So that is the thing. You would have to map a particular spike with a lot of things, whether you actually saw that development happening on ground. If you did not see, and yet there was a capital spike, then most likely it was some form of corruption that took place. Or who knows, I mean, might have been that they built some schools and some things in rural villages and that news never disseminated into the electoral cycle. But when that this infrastructural push or this capex push actually know how revived the economic fall of the state, one can only imagine that it was not well planned or did not really amount to anything significant. Now, after the 2019 elections, what happened was in 2019, actually BJP won more Lok Sabha seats in West Bengal than the TMC. So, which is probably the point that they decided ki bhai chhod sab bahut ho gaya and we'll stick to our normal stuff. And after that, you will see that the capital outlay growth went south forever almost. And this was the time when the state gave up every single hope of industrialization or similar things and went completely reliant on freebies. So ever since the 2019 elections, you will only hear of things like Lokir Bhandar, this Bhandar, that Bhandar, and 100 other Bhandars introduced. And nothing constructive happened after this particular margin. Nothing. So that is the capital outlay growth of a particular state. Now, I discuss this in particular details because the entire trajectory is pretty animated and funny. It's almost very close to being a funny joke, but then it becomes a PJ. But now, since I've explained how to look at these things in context of upcoming elections, be it state elections or Lok Sabha, you would be able to better analyze the graph in other states as well. Okay, now, if you take a different metric, let's take the factory NFCF, which is the private capital investments for building factories and stuff. Very interestingly, you will see one major spike that had occurred right before the TMC won in 2011, around the time of 2009 and 10 under the CPM, which was under Bhattacharya. So this is basically the culmination of every good thing that Bhattacharya tried to do, including the McKinsey reports and everything that happened as a result of all the
Look at
political
that
changes.
fucking peak. Look at that insane peak, and we are nowhere remotely close to that. And that was in 2008, 9, 10. Look at that giant peak.
So this was basically around 14,649 crore rupees of private capital investment behind factories and stuff. Okay?
And then that shows that if out of the blue, a devastated, destroyed commie society like West Bengal is hitting this kind of a peak in capital outlay, you know who would be up in arms about that West Bengal developing this, to this extent, and therefore they would have their cronies, their people here being propped up as the opposition and stuff, and then rule the party, rule the state for another 15 years, and make sure that this peak is never touched.
Yeah. And now the thing is, most people actually that okay, Buddhadeva Bhattacharya tried all these things and was wronged, but then somewhere down the line they will also have to take accountability that they took West Bengal into a spiral of a certain trend. And no, public memory is volatile, that's fine, but public memory also has a recency bias. So obviously we'll have all these years of a desperate economic state. And by the way, even this 2004 2008 span is also under the chief ministerialship of Buddhadeva Bhattacharya. Credit where it is due, had he tried improving the situation. But the fact is, in continuance, if we look at it, even before 2004-2005, when Buddhadeva Bhattacharya had become the chief minister, there was this long, dark age of Jyoti Basu. And the recency bias was heavy enough for people to actually vote them out of power. Although there was several push given to it by external players and stuff, some of them actually sponsored by people who wanted to halt the development of the particular state, definitely. But
yeah, you will see some peaks in the 90s under Jyoti Basu as well.
Yeah. There were certain periods of time when even Jyoti Basu wanted to industrialize, and then there were power cuts and stuff happening.
Yeah, pretty much 92 onwards. 92 onwards, he wanted it in his heart, but could not execute it much on the ground.
Yeah, so again, I agree, but then it is a lesson to take that you cannot go on completely screwing up the state's economy for a long time, and then one fine day you have a reconciliation with your soul and Atman and heart and whatever, and then you want to rectify everything, and people should fall for it. So you have to somewhere down the line balance things out. You cannot go extremely south, because after that every argument that you make would essentially be a moral argument. ठीक है कि तबाह कर तो दिया था पर उसके बाद कोशिश तो की. Now, all right, that's fine from a moral perspective, but who would buy that? The people who are actually suffering from those ill impacts of the economic state would not want to buy your logic, and simply you will not have stability in the state. That is the problem. So you should not at any point of time go.
They bought the logic until it started improving. When it started improving, all of a sudden they remembered, oh shit, CPM is so bad.
Yeah. No, that's the thing. Now, when the recent things have been so bad, it is also easier to manipulate this and that. That is also there. Which is why it is increasingly important for parties to actually keep the system or to keep the state stable, which is exactly our critique of the BJP as well. They might be doing good things, but if you're screwing up in most of the important sectors every now and then and people are pissed off about you, don't expect them to vote you out of power, and then 20 years down the line you'll crib कि कितना अच्छा काम कर रहे थे, लोगों ने हमारे बारे में गलत समझा के हमको बाहर निकाल दिया. That is exactly the kind of whining you do. That is exactly the kind of whining you do about Atal Bihari Vajpayee losing the elections, and that is what you will be doing when the BJP is voted out to power now. So history never really appreciates or rewards these people who whine and crib after the damage has been done, which is probably also the greatest lesson that we can take from a legend like Buddhadev Bhattacharya. Now, moving on. Uh, so this is one of the parameters. Uh, then there are other parameters as well. For example, if we take the revenue expenditure growth percentage and the capital expenditure growth percentage. Okay, so this is the capex share of budget. Let me just fix it. Capital outlay growth percentage, head to head.
একটু zoom in করেন।
And once again, you will see anytime the capital outlay growth percentage dipped, the revenue expenditure also did not have a great time, which basically also kinds of tells us, except for some weird years under the TMC, which also tells us that if your capital expenditure dips, in the long run, it will also affect revenue expenditure simply because where are these people gonna get jobs if capital is not built? So, for example, your one great source of employment under the CPM and the TMC was actually NEERAJAN. Now, if you are not building any capital, then simply where are you employing these people to dig the ground? So they, at the end of the day, are codependent on each other. And anytime there is a good capital outlay growth signature, even the revenue growth signature is naturally supposed to increase. But that correlation is not positively associated vice versa or the other way around. That's the point I'm trying to make. Now, another important thing is our revenue deficit amount, and that is needless to discuss. 21 of the 21 years, West Bengal has been under a revenue deficit. And the revenue deficit was around 37% at the peak of the CPIM regime, when we were in a very bad financial state. Also, at that same time, the factory NFCF was increasing and there were private investments. But understand,
why is it proportionate to revenue deficit?
Yeah.
Why is the increase in
being that-
CPFC absolutely proportional? Ajib.
No, here is one of the cases where one may think it is correlated, but it is not. Actually, anytime factory investments are made and then you have a spike over there, that effect would essentially trickle down into the economy 1 or 2 years later, because that is a parallel system of, let's say, economy. So there people are getting jobs and becoming wealthier. So that thing would automatically percolate into the economy after a couple of years.
Yeah.
So whatever is happening in a state at this point and whatever is happening in the private enterprise sector, even though they are happening at the same point, they are not dependent on each other in terms of one being the cause of the other.
Yes,
So
yes.
whatever
I'm wondering, why was
happening-
Buddhadev himself doing it? Because he was obviously causing the revenue deficit to go up. What was he doing to do that? At the same time, he was inviting factories.
Yeah, I mean, one would have to probably think that to implement the McKinsey report, certain trade-offs had to be made, I'm sure, because it actually had to have a lot of investments in terms of capitals and stuff and well. So maybe at some point they have to borrow money to actually implement the McKinsey report in its full potential. And I do remember that they had actually sought some form of central help to turn the state around, and there were negotiations going on. And this was also another volatile time simply in terms of the electoral dynamics at the center. For example, this one under UPA. And then at the same time, exactly in around 2006-07, the nuclear deal was proposed and the CPIM was opposing it. And so there was constant sparring between even the Congress and the CPIM, which was at the center, and West Bengal, it was the CPIM at the state. So there were several disputes and the Congress was very lackluster and not willing to help the CPIM so much as well. And remember, at that time, the Congress was not in alliance with the CPIM per se. I mean, they were perennial enemies at that time. They used to fight like anything. So that is there. And if anything, the revenue deficit has decreased under recent years, but then also nothing has been built as well. So one can only argue ki iska fayda hi kya hai. And the most important sector on which we are probably number one in the world is the social sector expenditure growth. The social sector expenditure growth has been going up and up and up. And it started from some 17%, and at the same time, during the last years of Buddhadev Bhattacharya, it had reached 42%. So he was apparently the god of private investments, god of revenue deficit, and also the god of freebies. Now these two are actually pretty much linked. So you would now understand why the revenue deficit was so high as well, and which is something I eventually pointed out as well. Anytime a major party who is incumbent or who has been incumbent for a while believes that they are going to lose, they essentially must also rely on freebies. So CPM did have a fair clue that they might be voted out to power as well. One might say, now there are several theories. Some people say that during the 2007-8 elections, whatever were held by elections and municipal elections, there they actually won a great victory. That doesn't mean that they were not anticipating a great defeat in 2011 elections, especially after the Andolan at Shingur and stuff. So naturally, these two are correlated, where there was a huge social sector expenditure growth, and naturally there was a revenue deficit corresponding to it. And after that, it went down. In the initial years, it went down simply because it was a new regime and they were fresh and they did not have relied on it so much. Even after that, it never really went down any further, because even sooner, after 2016, the new regime too became reliant on the social sector investment. Just that the economy too had expanded by that time. So even if by percentage it did not increase, the economy of 2019-20 West Bengal at the similar percentage of freebies is a huge number in terms of raw INR. So that basically counterbalanced things for a long while. Now moving on to a different state, maybe, and understanding in a better fashion the fiscal record of
One
most
moment.
of the states.
Shrayan, show the capital outlay of West Bengal again, and then compare it with other states later on. How that has not increased at all, because that's the saddest part of this discovery.
Okay. The capital outlay growth, the capital outlay in crores. Okay. So at some point under the CPIM, it was around 1,800 crores, and even at its peak, unconfirmed peak, it is only 31,000 crores at best.
Yeah, remember the number,
Overall,
guys, because we are going to compare it with other states.
yeah. And the last definitive record, which is confirmed and verified, is 22,000 crores and 23,000 crores, because these things are not confirmed. So someday the CAG might actually find out that there were a lot of scams over here and that this is not a verified amount and this would have to be slashed off, which is exactly why it is represented by a dotted line. That even the CAG right now has not been able to verify it in a confirmed fashion कि यहाँ पे कुछ घपला नहीं हुआ. Okay, and so also looking at it, the best sector in West Bengal has been roads and bridges, behind which we have an 87% capital expenditure. So, which is also naturally understandable, because that is the only goddamn thing that particular party had built. It was roads and bridges. Then there were bridges breaking apart and new bridges being formed, Majirhat, everything, Kakdeep and whatever. But then that is that. Water and sanitation also, there were significant investments made. So 79% of the entire budget of that particular portfolio was behind capital infrastructure development. Education 1%. So highly educated West Bengal with 5, 6, 7 Nobel laureates or whatever, or Nobel laureates adjacent, has a 1% education budget. And we might take a greater look at that. So okay, let us do that right away and we'll come back. Uh, Go to the portfolio split, right? And we'll look at West Bengal and education. Look at the graph. The white graph is basically for revenue expenditure and the green line is basically for outlay. In the educational portfolio itself, and you would see that the capex intensity wala jo axis hai, that always grows by 0.1%, because maximum the amount of capital investments we have done is 1% of the budget. During the peak years of CPIM 2006-7, the revenue expenditure, that is, so what can possibly revenue expenditure be under education sector? It is the salaries of teachers and stuff, the bureaucrats who appoints these people to several posts, and there might be some form of educational subsidies given. So some of the Prokolpos, maybe Uyghur and stuff, and the Vivekananda scholarship, all these come under revenue expenditure. Although these have been introduced under the TMC regime. At that time, I don't know what was there. So revenue expenditure at 6,000 300 crores approximately, and the capital outlay, that is infrastructural development in the education sector, was 10 crores. Now understand, this capital outlay that is being mentioned is responsible for the development of schools, colleges, public universities, madrasas, any toilets that have to be built in the schools, any water purifier that has to be introduced in the schools, or any kind of midday meal that exists in terms of the logistics. तो ये सब कुछ आपका हो रहा है इस फ्लैट लाइन के अंडर, which never really crosses anything whatsoever. And rest of the white line is perennially expanding exponentially, जहाँ पे you're only giving salaries to a bunch of people. So understand, in 8.6 crore odd rupees in 2005 and 6, everything was being maintained in West Bengal. Schools, colleges, universities, सब कुछ जो था. And salaries and etc. were at around 5,500 crores. At the peak of TMC, when they returned in 2021, the revenue expenditure had gone to 35,648 crores and the capital outlay was 224 crores. Now you can only imagine in 224 crores में आपने किन लोगों को मालामाल कर दिया होगा, because also remember there was a teacher recruitment scam going on during this period. So it is even worse than we can envision it to be. And the second most important thing is, basically since this line is completely flat, one would think that the capital investments for the education portfolio has been consistently bad and the same. It is in fact not the same, it is actually reducing, simply because capital outlay costs in the market has increased and we have not kept up with that as well. Even if by percentage of the budget it is almost the same, the education budget in West Bengal never increased. And a budget that never increased, you are occupying the same percentage of the particular budget. Meanwhile, the cost of building infrastructure, schools, and computers and everything has increased. Now, when we are discussing, let's say, anything like introducing AI into the West Bengal or the Indian discourse, भाई कंप्यूटर तुम कहाँ से ही खरीदोगे, ये तो तुम्हारा हालत है.
Is this amount, the green line, the numbers for the green line, are they inflation adjusted?
They are inflation adjusted in the same way that the revenue line is inflation adjusted. But again,
Cool.
in some places it might not be sufficient, simply because if you're thinking about capital infrastructure in terms of computers, so the computers electronics, for example, might be a depreciating asset in the first place. But then the kind of system you actually need for the current education system is much costlier than what this can account for. So basic computer where you can basically maybe teach children AI or coding requires subsequently good amount of specs. You will have to upgrade your RAMs and stuff, your monitors, your GPUs and God knows what. God, even I know what. But you are not doing that. Specifically when half of this fund would be eventually diverted to maybe building some school in some rural area just for virtue signaling. So no targeted expenditure of this actual
And teachers
amount.
won't come to that school. Teachers won't come to that school, and the students will drop out anyway.
Yeah, and that is a major problem in West Bengal as well. You'll see so many government schools are mostly vacant. So you are simply propping up new buildings and new schools in different regions so that people can access it, and none of them are full to their capacity.
Actually, dinner cards,
So you
bro.
can understand. And the only thing it funds is actually your cards, so you can understand how detrimental the sector would be. And I mean, God only knows how this kind of an education system, state having this kind of an education system, takes pride in 6 of its Nobel laureates, because at least none of them I know were a beneficiary of this education system. So it is that
No,
same thing where
presidency and Kolkata school, at least for at least 2 of them.
and Jadavpur University, where every 3 years you are promised that money will be given, and then you go out with a donation goal to the alumni for us. So that. Now, moving on to a different state maybe. So through West Bengal, we have understood
Gujarat.
the...
Let's go to Gujarat just
margin.
for fun. Let's shock people.
Okay, so let's go to Gujarat just for fun. So what we'll do is we'll take a bad state and a great state alternatingly,
Yeah.
and we'll keep spoiling people's mood. So this, by the way, is Gujarat. Okay, let me go for the state explorer as well in Gujarat. And here is the capital outlay in crores. Now let's go back to West Bengal for a second to show you something. So this is West Bengal's capital outlay axis, and it increases something like 0, 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 to 40,000. And the capped amount is 40,000 crores. In Gujarat, you reach that 40,000 crore midway, and the line actually goes up to 80,000 crore with a population less than West Bengal's. So they are twice as good as us at least, simply under the government control sector. And their story begins at 4,100 crore in 2004 and 5, which is when Narendra Modi is the chief minister. And by the time he got elected as the prime minister, the capital outlay crore had become 22,677. And whatever groundwork he laid eventually increased the capital outlay to around 35,000 crore, and the latest margins are 58,000 crores. Further up, it is apparently 75,000 crores. Now, this will have to take a few years to get verified, but then it is what it is. Now, more importantly, this is the raw amount. We are going to take a look at capital outlay percentage, or rather the capex share of budget. And the capex share of budget starts from a base 14%. So it was perennially above 14%. And at its peak, at some point in the 2012 elections, it reached 23%. And it only dipped at its worst in the recent years during the pandemic. Secondly, if we're going to look at
this with West Bengal as well.
Okay, what thing is this? Capex share of budget, right?
Yeah.
So let's compare it with West Bengal. Now, just look at the percentage. It's the lowest mark is 14, and the highest is somewhere around 26. For West Bengal, the lowest mark is 2, very promising, and the highest is much below 14. So our capital expenditure percentage is limited beyond the point from where Gujarat's capital expenditure starts. So basically, if you are going to place these two graphs in the same axis, ये जो ग्राफ खत्म हो गया है ना, इसके ऊपर जो है, जो स्क्रीन में आ नहीं रहा, वहां से गुजरात का चालू हुआ.
Yeah.
That is the point to be made. Now,
people metaphorically say that X and Y are not even on the same planet. Here, West Bengal and Gujarat are not even on the same graph. It's not even possible to put them on the same screen.
Yeah. Or if we have to, we'll have to squash it to a certain extent vertically, after which nothing would be visible in the first place. Okay, so acha, let's go for the factory NFCF as well. Okay, so this is basically the private ecosystems investment behind creating factories. Let's do it for West Bengal first, because West Bengal shows India the way, what Bengal thinks tomorrow, what Bengal thinks today, India thinks tomorrow. So our factory NFCF percentage in terms of crores, or not percentage, in terms of crores, starts from 0 and occasionally translates to minus 247 crores or even minus 971 crores. So at several points of times, you will have been incurring losses of around 1,000 crores simply by the private sector for making factories. And for god-awful reasons, no one knows. It is around the 2021 elections. So figure out what happened over there. Partly it is because it was after the pandemic, so obviously people incurred losses. But what else was in 2021, where there was widespread peace, massacring the entire state, and other good things were happening? So anywhere between minus 1,000 crores to 14,000 crores under the peak of Bhattacharya's McKinsey report runs. We are going to see the same for Gujarat now. And it starts from 0 crores and it reaches puny 72,865 crores at the peak of 2014 and 15, just before Narendra Modi was being projected as the next Prime Minister. 72,865 crores is way higher than our private investment and state capital investment or capital expenditure combined. So simply the private ecosystem adds to the economy this amount of money, which is probably more than 5 to 6 of our portfolios combined in West Bengal. And to also notice this, the only time they had a major spike was in 2021-22 again, which is 2 years after the COVID pandemic. Now one would think that why is the shock shown in 2021? It is because that's how the private ecosystem works. So anytime you actually incur a shock, you have to absorb it, and that would not reflect in that particular year's budget. Simply because you have already brought the material and you do not have human expenditure, you do not have human capital to work on those things. So there is a lockdown going on and everyone is sitting at home. So that damage would be reflected only when the resume back to normalcy and you start looking at the budget all over again. But notice, they absorbed that shock of minus 57,000 crores. In a year, they recovered and they jumped and then reached back a peak of 56,204 crores within one calendar year, which is basically very close to the peak that they had achieved around 10 years ago. That's the insanity of this state. So basically understand, they had incurred a loss of minus 57,000 crores. In the next calendar years, they're sitting at 57,000 crores positive. This is the shock absorbing capacity of the state. This is how they absorb major shocks of major disasters so that the impact must not be faced by the state government. They have already reached that position where they have created this alternative ecosystem, which basically works as a parallel society itself, which at the last podcast, as we pointed it out, is exactly what NEERAJAN Roy had written, that your society must reach a point where who is in power or who is the king or who is forming the government doesn't really matter to you, and the society has to take off as it is on their own feet. Now, to discuss a few other things, if we look at the revenue deficit percentage, so let's get back to West Bengal once again. In West Bengal, the revenue deficit keeps swinging anywhere between 0% to, the revenue deficit keeps swinging anywhere between 5% to 36%. And all of the 21 years, it is in deficit for Gujarat. This is the zero mark, by the way, guys. And anything that is beyond the zero mark is what we call the revenue surplus. So for most part of Gujarat's last 20 years history, it has been in a revenue surplus, and that revenue surplus has at several points reached 6.41% and 11%. So an 11% of revenue surplus basically means that you are going to self-finance the next big economic upgradation of your state with the money that you have gained in profits. Think for yourselves now that how is it that they are the juggernaut that they are? And even there are times where they indeed were in a revenue deficit. One of them was simply during the times of COVID. In the period, everyone was basically in a revenue deficit. So that cannot be a mark of comparison. The other times,
Freight equalization. Freight equalization policies didn't screw Gujarat, Shrayan. That's why they were able to achieve this.
Yeah. Actually, Nehru was particularly fond of Gujarat for some reason, so which is
Yeah.
why
He had
they
great
were never.
relationships with Vallabhbhai Patel. That's
Yeah,
why he loved Gujarat
yeah.
so much.
They were basically poster boys of friendship, and so never discriminated against, never shared a border with an enemy nation, let's say, which is particularly hostile or volatile, never had natural disasters like, let's say, earthquakes and riots, particularly peaceful state. Nothing significantly happens over there actually. So, and on the top of that, they're so illiterate. They are so damn illiterate, which is what we are going to see next. The illiteracy of the Gujarati education system, whereby their capital expenditure is around 3,266 crores, and our peak capital expenditure in the education sector of the highly educated progressive West Bengal with 5 Nobel laureates is 511 crores. So even their capital expenditure in less important sector like education is nearly 7 times or 6 times at least of what we are investing. Education, by the way, of illiterate Gujarat. And every 3-4 months you will have one report by some weird guy who would say, Gujarat mein to education is so lackluster, it is so less important. Bhai,
Yeah,
what is the
HDI,
point? Yeah.
HDI.
In fact, I just saw a report probably by print or something where they are saying कि गुजरात में कितने सारे बच्चों को डिवीजन नहीं आता. What they would not tell you कि उससे भी बहुत ज़्यादा बच्चों को वेस्ट बंगाल में भी वो नहीं आता. Now, my simple point has always been, look, what is the point of education if you are not going to get employed and earn your living and live peacefully? If philosophy of what a world by Will Durant is what you want to study, like we want to, that's fine. And we have every right to do it simply because we are passionate about the particular thing. But do not make it the gold standard of education or metric or societal standards of living simply if you are dying hungry and must immigrate from the state in which you were born, and then cite the amnesia of a particular times which has been long past. Every passing day, the way the commies envision West Bengal is becoming uncannily similar to the Animal Farm, where Boxer is, or was it Clover? Clover is reminding herself of the days of the Great Revolution. And meanwhile, the Boxer is being taken for slaughter. So that
Sean,
is
how much is
just,
the purchase power of each state relevant in this context? Because maybe you can argue that, things will simply seem bigger in number in Gujarat because everything is costlier there. You can't have 20 rupee dimbhat in Gujarat, obviously, and matir bhade cha and aloo in biryani.
the thing is, then if you are not going to rely on numbers and you're going to rely on subjectivity of the things,
No, purchase
also
power
see,
is different. 3,000 crores doesn't get you the same things in Gujarat that it would
I
get
get
you in
that.
Bengal.
The purchase power is different, but then what is the purchase power based on? भाई तुम ऐसे ही तो आउट ऑफ थिन ईयर यू आर नॉट बीइंग एबल टू इंक्रीज द परचेस पावर ना. ऐसा तो नहीं है कि तुमने आज डिक्लेयर किया इसका कीमत इतना होगा एंड विदाउट मेकिंग ट्वीक्स और चेंज इन द सिस्टम यू नेक्स्ट डे डिक्लेयर की अच्छा आज से दाम 4 गुना बढ़ गए, आपकी सैलरी भी 4 गुना बढ़ गई, ठीक है जाइए. ऐसा तो नहीं होता. That jump doesn't happen just like that. You work towards it, you reach it. वहाँ पे ठीक है. Once income has increased, then you also increase the price of your commodities because that artificial inflation is very common anywhere, and that is the best way you go about liquidating your debt. Anytime you introduce that aspect of inflation, then your debt liquidation becomes equally easy because you have to pay less in terms of relative money. So यहाँ पे तो they are always in revenue surplus. Forget purchase power. Revenue deficit and revenue surplus is not dependent on that. It is dependent on the metrics of a particular state. So how is it that your best managed social state is in a revenue deficit for 21 years straight, and then there is another state which is in a revenue surplus based on the metrics of their own state for around 15 years? And revenue surplus of what? Revenue surplus of 11%, which is basically your revenue deficit most of the times. So it's equally high on the other side of the axis. That how do you justify?
Shrayan, we need a
Simply
key
how-
points, key takeaway points and bullet points analysis of and comparison visually in two tables between Gujarat and West Bengal. That will be a lot of fun to post everywhere.
Yeah, that would have to be make. Maybe I can make it tonight or any time soon.
Yeah.
And there's another thing. Now, how do you explain the complete lack of a private economy itself in the two states?
Hmm.
And by the way, now if you are going to go into that nitty-gritties, let's also discuss what exactly happened in Gujarat during this peak period of 2006 to 2009. Was it completely because the West Bengal government wanted so desperately a particular person and the Gujarat government came with AK-47s and kidnapped him and took him away to their state? Is that what your argument is? भाई तुमने अपने स्टेट में इन्वेस्टमेंट कॉन्फिडेंस जनरेट नहीं कर पाए उसमें किस थी तुम्हारी इवन रिलेटिव टू योर ओन इकोनॉमी चेक आउट योर प्राइवेट सेक्टर ना तुम अपना ही जो बजट है तो अपना ही जो तुम्हारे इन्फ्लेशन रेट से अकाउंट फॉर एवरीथिंग एंड एज अ परसेंटेज ऑफ दैट व्हाट इज योर प्राइवेट इन्वेस्टमेंट इंडस्ट्री अमाउंट So basically, it is like the same thing. There's this fellow. I do not even go on to slang him. He posted something recently. This German YouTuber guy keeps posting bizarre shit, where he said simply changing the parameters of looking at thing, you can draw completely different conclusions. So what conclusions do you draw on the fact that every goddamn Gujarati prefers to stay in his own state? And every goddamn Bengali must migrate to Bangalore. जो आंखों से दिख रहा है प्रत्यक्ष को भी प्रमाण की जरूरत नहीं है और आप प्रमाण में भी प्रत्यक्षता खोज रहे हैं तो करो.
A solution to every problem.
Anyway, so
A problem to every
solution to every problem is the metrics that you're looking at is wrong.
Yeah. What's the scene with Karnataka? Since we have a lot of viewers with Karnataka.
Yeah, we'll go to Karnataka. Before that, just we'll have a small look at every portfolio that is operating in Gujarat, and you will see the insane amounts of.
Yeah.
Okay. So West Bengal may just one last thing we're going to check out.
Yeah, remember to zoom in, okay?
Yeah, the road infrastructure, roads and bridges. So there you will see that the capital outlay in roads and bridges, one of the rare portfolios of West Bengal, which exceeds its revenue expenditure. And there the capital outlay at its highest point is 5,882 crores. Okay? So essentially 6,000 crores being built at its peak. We are going to check out the thing for Gujarat, where at the peak of its roads being built in Gujarat is around 17,000 crores. So almost 3 times West Bengal's price. And the greater thing to be understood is, once again, it is not that they had everything settled from the very beginning. You'll see for a very long time, their revenue expenditure was in the road sector higher than their capital expenditure. So they're maintaining more than they were building. But that doesn't mean they kept the train in the same way. So there was indeed an inflection point where they kept working and it compounded, and their revenue expenditure eventually became less than their capital expenditure. So at some point, they completely solved their maintenance and status quo issue and then moved on towards expanding in terms of building as well.
Yeah, because Modi had to spend a lot of time electrifying Gujarat in the first place. After that, after that, you could build factories and roads.
And as we discussed even in the last day and in yet another podcast, that electrification was the basis of so much of development that it largely changed the entire culture of the state, where most people went from seeking freebies in terms of electricity to getting certain 3-wire electricity in the remotest of villages. And after that, they never basically asked for freebies. Even when the AAP came and started promising them freebies in the Gujarat elections, There were normal people who were pointing out to the up guys, where do you bring this amount from? क्या maths है आपकी समझाइए हमें. And nobody fell for that. So basically, it's the same thing. Freebies, as I've repeatedly said, is a lazy alternative for a system that was supposed to be built in the right time but was not because you procrastinated. If political parties start building the alternative channel of income wealth generation when they are in their honeymoon period and get things done swiftly, they would have the alternative economic channels to which people can earn a dignified living and would never have to fall for freebies. But you cannot go on to say that if you have no source of income in the first place, why are these people asking freebies? It is pretty obvious why they are asking it. Gujarat is probably the model state which solved it in the earliest times, where they basically built the sources of earning, employment, and everything, and they never had to go back to that system of freebies again. So basically, it was just one scheme implemented with some amount of political repercussions at the backdrop of one earthquake and one riot, and sticking to it, which basically changed the entire culture of a state. That's the larger lesson to take back. Now, let's go to Karnataka. Okay, even roads and bridges, even agriculture and allied sectors. Agriculture is one sector which is constantly losing its value and depreciating. There is no innovation, nothing going on. Even in agricultural sector, there is an odd 1,000 crores of capital infrastructure development by the Gujarat government. So see, simply the people who have actually solved their basic problems in terms of employment and other things, they are now not becoming lackluster or complacent. They are in fact now working on those rare sectors which nobody else is paying attention to, which is what you get when you start early. They are actually officially, them and Maharashtra are officially the problem solvers of this country. They are the first people to jump into solving or tackling or beginning to tackle those problems which we have not even started solving yet or thought of started solving yet. Moving to Karnataka. So if we go to the Karnataka State Explorer. Okay, so to be very clear, I am not extremely familiar on the politics of Karnataka and how the electoral circles have been, but I guess we can interpret a few good things from the data. And one interesting thing, obviously, about Karnataka is that they simply keep switching. So, which many people argue is the best way to develop, that every 5 years you switch your government in a bipartisan system and you see how you progress. So, we can take a look at it if that at all works or not. So, yeah. This is the revenue deficit. Let us go with capital outlay in crores. And you would see one random evening, the capital outlay was around 4,600 crores in Karnataka. A few years later, around 15 years later, the capital outlay is 57,348 crores. It has perennially increased, it has consistently increased. In fact, the slope of increment has only increased at certain points. So if you see here, the rate of increment has actually also increased. So it has accelerated in terms of economic growth. That is the first thing to be noted. Secondly, if we look at...
And it's pretty much only Bangalore driving it, right?
Yeah, that is one thing. People can argue that a particular city drives it, but it's not that. You see, anytime there is a central city, because that's the system everywhere. Every state has a few cities which drives the growth of the entire state.
Yeah.
The thing
so
is,
check out the
utilize.
So show us the different sectors for Karnataka's expenditures as well.
Yeah. So just we'll take a look at capital outlay growth, and you will see that even the capital outlay growth, although it fluctuates, is pretty consistent. Revenue deficit, in terms of revenue deficit, most of the times Karnataka is very much in the revenue surplus, except for that one COVID period. You will see that they are at a consistent revenue surplus of 10% to 0% to 10%. Okay? It's only during COVID that they went in a revenue deficit. That too was a mere 10%. Otherwise, their entire premise is completely sorted. If you see social sector expenditure, a good 25 to 27% going to social sector expenditure. So basically, these are freebies masquerading as something else, social security schemes. But the freebies are not coming as a, what to say, status quo. They are not the only way you win elections. That's not the point. Freebies are made possible and viable because already you are a booming economy. So your economy is fixed, and that is fueling your freebies. It's not your freebies that is fueling your electoral policy and hence everything else. It's the other way around. Let us move to the portfolio split for Karnataka. And we are going to start from what? Let's say education. Start from education itself. Now, once again, simply look at this graph. Every state in this particular country, whether good or bad, they do not simply invest on education, which is to say primary education, because where else would you invest? From most of the
But Shrayan,
universities, you have bodies of, yeah,
yeah, finish your point.
they have other bodies of investment. For example, several universities fall under the UGC or other stuff. Many fall under the AICT. So these are actually centrally funded as well. So that is partially applicable. But if your capital infrastructure development under education sector never increase, that explains why the primary education is in such a despicable state, because that is the only common phase where every student is studying.
Yeah.
And across states, that graph is completely flat.
And to be fair to Gujarat, only in Gujarat we saw some growth even in capital outlay for education as well as other stuff as well. For everybody else, it's a flat line forever since 2004. For Gujarat, there was growth even in that.
Yeah. Yeah, you are making a point, I guess. You're saying something else in this?
No, this only. Yeah, I wanted to point out this only, that there was capital outlay growth for Gujarat, nobody else.
Yeah. Gujarat, I guess there's some amount of that in Maharashtra as well. And simply for any state with a major economy, when the economy is sizable, so even if there is no direct increment, there's a there's a direct link between geographical concentration of political instability, which in turn is a dampener of economic growth. Absolutely. In fact, in particular states, which is what I pointed out in the Bangla podcast, which have good law and order situations, that is where the economy takes off. So when did the Gujarat economy take off? After the 2002 riots. Because after the 2002 riots, there have been absolutely no law or disputes or political violence in Gujarat. It has been extremely stable. In fact, even in recurring random news, you will not find any significant kind of violence or clashes happening in Gujarat in the past 15-20 years at least.
But
same is for Odisha.
Let's talk about the biggest controversy that Gujarat has faced in the last 5-6 years, which is if Gujarat is so awesome, why did they have to cover up their slums, block the view when Trump came to Ahmedabad? Why are there slums, Shrayan?
Very interestingly, a few weeks or maybe a couple of months ago, I saw a very interesting post of one of my companions from Jadavpur. And I guess it was some large-scale CPIM leader also who pointed out that slums should not be hidden. Slums should not be removed. Slums are a reality of an industrialized society. Slums are indicative of those places from where people are migrating from villages to city to build a life for themselves. So slums are a signature of a positive economic situation. So that's why they have slums.
Yeah.
So do have you.
Yeah.
Now the thing is, probably they had to hide it because the guests or international guests arrive in Gujarat, and you simply cannot make them come to Kolkata or West Bengal for that matter, unless they would be blown apart into pieces by some nuisance.
Yeah, but at least we don't have slums, in West Bengal, in Kolkata, nowhere. We don't have slums. Only Gujarat has slums.
In fact, every time I descend on the roads, I feel so lucky that we have actually not let anyone remain poor.
Auto
They have
Bangla.
empowered them to a certain extent where even the poorest of poor people use helicopters for intra-district commuting. We do not have Uber shuttles. We have Uber spaceships now in Kolkata. I mean, okay. So for education now, let's go for industry and minerals. You'd see even in industry and minerals, look at the revenue expenditure, 17354 crore. Then there is 480 crores. Now, once again, you look any good state which is managing things overall, there you will not see a huge discrepancy or a huge disproportionate gap between revenue expenditure, capital expenditure. Every state has a particular sector of, let's say, expertise. Bangalore, for example, has the, let's say, greatest IT sector of India. So it is only obvious that in places like industry and minerals or hardcore things like that, they'll be lagging behind a bit. But overall, as a sum total, if we look at it from perspective of, let's say, something like a neural network, but each of the node is representative of one parameter. Output node is always in a progressive state in most of the well-managing states. And what else? Agriculture and allied sectors. The same problem. You see, agriculture is yet another sector where there's no capital investments or capital intensity boom at all. So
Shrayan,
it's the same view of things. Yeah.
have you thought further about what you're going to do with Ledger? Are you going to put it up open access?
Yeah, that would have to be done. It would simply have to be hosted as a website. It's just that I am a bit occupied with certain things, so I want somebody to do it, and I'm looking for somebody to do it so that people can explore
I'm
things
sure
for
we
themselves.
have plenty of guys in the live chat to do it, and we'll get you all
Yeah,
connected. So what I'm wondering is, I think everybody from the live chat who are from different states would like to check out their state data and compare it with some other state. So
definitely.
we can now move on to Maharashtra and Punjab now.
Yeah. So that we will do. Let's move on to Maharashtra and we'll move on to Punjab. So let's move on to Punjab first.
Yeah, first Punjab,
And we
because
can
it's
end
again a
with
bad state.
Maharashtra.
Yes. Oh,
Okay, so
Shrayan,
Punjab.
sorry. Sorry, everyone. I
Uh,
know we don't have many Odia viewers here, but Odisha is also a very important player in this, because they used to be like Bengal and they are no longer like Bengal. Everybody else has been really awesome for 20, 30 years, and and places like Punjab and Bengal have been sucky for about 20 years, 30 years now.
okay. So a
But
few words for
Odisha is in a
Odisha.
different spot. Yeah,
A
continue.
few words for Odisha because it is a very respectable and reputable state. Odisha is one of those rare states which is completely fiscally well managed. So there is no revenue deficit in the history of Odisha in the past 20 years. Completely fiscally conserved state. The only problem perhaps with Odisha, there are two problems. One is unavoidable, one probably can be worked upon. The first being that they are always perennially threatened by cyclones. So every time there is a major cyclone happening, like Aila or even Sifoni or any of those major cyclones that hit the eastern coast of India, the investment cycle in the particular state is completely disrupted. So if you see simply the state of Odisha, I want to show you a few quick things and then we'll move on to Punjab and that. Okay, so where is Odisha exactly? And even if in the state explorer we go to Odisha, just look at the revenue deficit curve of Odisha. Here is the 0% mark. Odisha has always been in a revenue surplus. And that revenue surplus has reached as high as 40% point at some time around 21, 22. So that is how fiscally well conserved they are. They have never been in a revenue deficit in the past 15 to 20 years. And look at how far off they have been in revenue surplus. The problem with Orissa is if you go to the factory NFCF, you will see several disruptions. And if you check out, most of these disruptions are actually forged by some cyclone that hit the coast of Orissa and destroyed almost everything. And after that, things had to go completely south. So every time a cyclone hits them, the factory investment suffers huge losses. At around 2019, due to one of those, they actually had to incur a loss of 20,000 crores. So they are that one particular state which are cursed by natural disasters perennially, which is why they never can come to a fixed amount of scheme or agenda for themselves. Yet, they are one of the best performing states. So kudos to them. Probably the only thing they can do is Since they have these amounts of revenue surplus, maybe borrow a little more, maybe go one step ahead, take a little more risk, and build higher for themselves. Or probably figure out some way or the other, maybe we can't say what it is, maybe scaffolding or something else, to actually minimize the risk of damages done by cyclones, and then they can go forward with whatever industrial plans they have. Moving to Punjab. Uh, Punjab, by the way, is yet another of those states which has been in revenue deficit perennially in the past 21 years, never recovering from it. So, we are going to have a look at Punjab's revenue deficit, and it starts from 6% of a revenue deficit. That is the minimum. And the highest revenue deficits recorded is around 19 to 20%, 22% at some point of time. And well, it has always been bad, irrespective of the party. So, for example, the SAD is the alliance that was being formed with the BJP. SAD is the Shiromani Akali Dal. Then it was during the Congress era and AAP era, and has always been a revenue deficit. Even
So
if you
Punjab
look at
is
the capital outlay growth.
Punjab is inverse
Yeah.
ancient India and inverse of Neerajan Rai's observations about ancient India. So no matter which party comes to power, your job is to not do anything and
Yeah.
not produce anything.
Yeah, Punjab is the ultimate dystopian state because it is probably the only state which does worse than Bengal in every metric. And that takes a lot. That takes a lot, even when you have a well-meaning people. For example, Amarinder Singh, for that matter, might have been a Congress guy, but he was an extremely respectable guy. Even with the Akali Dal, they were like the Bhumi Putras of Punjab, and people respected them and trusted them. So at no point there was such levels of policy paralysis and extreme hate for the political powers of Punjab like it was in West Bengal. And yet they are doing or going the way they are going. Uh, Taking a look at the ultimate dystopia, Punjab, by the way, 21 of 21 years in revenue deficit, only 6.9% of budget building anything, borrowing for today, capital assets never. Capital flows to roads and bridges. So roads and bridges, once again, is the only portfolio where there's a 86% capital infrastructure development, or let's say capital expenditure development. Agriculture and allied sector, 0% capex.
So and what's
And
this
you want
capital outlay peak at in 2019-24? This is in which sector?
no, this is overall. This is the
Okay.
combination of every
Cool,
political
cool.
sector
So
combined. We are going to
when
look at
was
the portfolio split
the
and
farm
then
law
we will get
protest?
there. I believe it was around the similar time. Let me check it. It was around that time of COVID, na? After or before?
Yeah.
Let us check. Farm law protests. 2019.
How?
Cool.
What's
It was
why is
2019.
that coinciding with such a gigantic capital? I mean, disproportionate, out of the ordinary, mysterious capital outlay boost.
It might
so weird.
actually. It would be very understandable simply because capital outlay basically means moving away from the agrarian economy. If you look at it that way, any significant capital outlay would be moving from the agrarian economy to a more industry-based economy. Yeah? And who are the thekadars of the agrarian economy who manage everything in Punjab, all the resources in Punjab? And remember, even in the Supreme Court committee that was formed later, it was found that most of the states, almost 90% of the states, were in support of the farm laws. It was only the farmers of Punjab and Haryana, and particularly Punjab, who had opposed it. And most of them were not really farmers or poor farmers per se, they were the almost kind of jotedars. So that, and so I actually find it pretty counterintuitive because there is an agriculture mafia in this country as well, whether you like it or not, and they are not all holy. So you see this in several states that any time a state wants to industrialize, even in West Bengal, you have seen it. Na? When a state is trying to industrialize, a certain section would always oppose it, and they'll be largely agrarian. What was the entire land acquisition protest about? Who were being hijacked and who were being used as a weapon to stop the industrialization of West Bengal. So it's the same signature basically. You might say that they were brainwashed, that's fine. But then essentially you got brainwashed and you harmed your entire state. Is there a COVID spike? Well, we can't say that because what exactly was Punjab doing, Dikita, during COVID? They were not managing it any better than any other state. I don't recall that happening. So we can't really say what happened. Maybe we'll have a better idea because I haven't studied Punjab in depth. The few states I have actually studied are West Bengal, Odisha, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu to a certain extent, and Kerala, which is a disaster as well in some sectors. Punjab is one state I have not studied. So maybe someday we can actually bring someone from Punjab who can explain things better. I'm sure Rutvik could explain a certain things about Karnataka much better than I do. Anand could for Tamil Nadu similarly.
Yeah, we could
I
do
can
great
for
stuff
West
with this
Bengal.
ledger. And if we do specific live streams for specific states, that's going to be fun because there's a guy, one of our viewers, who's been contacting me on Twitter to talk about Punjab as well. So this will be fun to discuss with him.
Yeah,
You and I
yeah.
and one guy from each state. That's how we will go about
Yeah,
it then.
that would be great fun. Acha,
Yeah.
so let's just look at the other things now. Uh, portfolio split. Okay, so let's go to portfolio split. I guess we have discussed everything from the State Explorer. Okay, so look at factory NFCF. Nothing significant really, although in the later years there have been some amount of factories being built by the private players, around 12,000 crores. But then mostly no trend. It goes up and then goes down. And this is one of those regions where the factory investments and confidence are actually dependent on the state government. And you see that God knows what is happening. So that's the thing. When I actually looked over Punjab simply to prepare myself to say what the things had to be said, it was completely dystopian. It's meaningless. I mean, one simply can't figure out how the hell is state surviving even now. Because once I take you to the portfolio sector, every sector is basically complete flatline in terms of capex and a complete insane berserk line in terms of relics. Let's go to that sector.
Then what caused that peak in 2019? Which sector caused that peak?
Let's check it out. Actually.
হ্যাঁ, সবকটা পোর্টফোলিও গিয়ে গিয়ে দেখ ওই 19-এ কার এত বিরাট বুস্ট হয়েছে, তো তার কাটা বুস্ট তো।
আচ্ছা, excellent. পাঞ্জাব শুরু হয়ে যা।
হ্যাঁ, তুই খোঁজ, ওটা আমি একটু রেসপন্ড করি এখানে। ইয়া, জাস্ট লিভিং অ্যাওয়ে সেইং, দাদা তুমি রেবেকা ওয়াটসঅ্যাপের সাথে স্ট্রিম করেছো? একটা না, অনেকগুলো করেছি। ওর চ্যানেলে অনেকগুলো, আমার চ্যানেলে অনেকগুলো। শি ইজ an Israeli streamer, আর এখন যখন Israeli US lobby is going through yes, because there's more interesting and fun stuff happening in India, therefore I'm not bothered about that. Yeah, maybe I can invite Rebecca to speak once. অনেকদিন হয়নি ওর সাথে।
Water and sanitation, housing and urban development. No, this. Okay, apparently it is housing and urban development which has a peak at the same time. Wow, acha. Let's check out the others as well. Agriculture to nothing. Rural development, nothing. Irrigation and flood, nothing remarkable. Energy. Okay, there's a peak in energy as well. Acha, interesting. So maybe these two portfolios that you want to look out for: housing and urban development and energy.
তো তারপরে how did it completely disappear after that 1 year? What kind of investment is this? This looks very fishy.
Then it could have been very well been a scam, or it might have been some amount of, there are certain things probably I can't say it that way, but it is fishy that the only time when there was a large scale protest from a particular state, there was a capital investment spike, and then nothing really happened despite that capital investment spike. So might be that fund was diverted elsewhere,
and then everybody goes back to the exact amount of capital outlay as forever before. That is so weird.
Does it have anything to do with major MSP procurement? No. MSP procurement, even if it had to be in the revenue sector. Na? Capital में क्या ही है उसका? It had to be a part of RevX. Even if it was MSP or any minimal price like thing. So maybe that needs to be studied more. Acha. So education,
Hmm.
the dystopia in education. See, now look at it. Capex of 3.32%, 521 crores. Now imagine, even with all this dystopia going on, their capital outlay in education is more than Bengal's. So Bengal and Punjab are probably competing to be who can be the worst of the worst, best of the worst over here. Acha. That 511 crore and the 15,000 crores of revenue expenditure compared to a 521 crores of capital outlay in the sector of education. In the sector of health too, I mean, health mein to I guess this thing needs to go in the negative direction with all the drugs thing that is going on. So 4,700 crores and 230 crores of capital outlay, nothing remarkable, pretty bad. Water and sanitation, okay, water and sanitation. Now water and sanitation obviously has to be, something has to be going on over there, given that there are so many rivers. Obviously there's the entire Indus River and every single distributary of it, and it's a border state, so then every time any water is stopped from going from anywhere to anywhere, you'll have to build infrastructure for that. And then it's also an irrigational state primarily, so understandable, something must be going on in that sector. uh, Housing and urban development. Okay, so there's this goddamn tweak. I don't know for what, and apparently the capital outlay investment was 2,300. Now, simply look at this as well. Despite such an insane peak, the capital outlay is only at 2,000 crores. Understand, anytime there was a 2,000 crore capital outlay in any sector in Gujarat, even for agriculture sector in Gujarat, remember it was somewhere over here.
Hmm. Yeah, that would be
And
chump
here
change
that,
for Gujarat.
yeah, here that capital investment is at the topmost point of the graph. So once again, it is basically, if the graph of Gujarat is here, Punjab is here.
Hmm.
It is this sealed. It is sealed by the lowest things happening in Gujarat.
Yeah.
So housing and urban development, maybe somebody will figure out. This is what is the most interesting and most depressing thing: agriculture. Now, understand, every time something good or bad tries to happen in the sector of agriculture, these are the first people who jump up and try to dismantle or dislodge every sane conversation going on.
No, see,
They
these
have
two,
us.
the two states which are the most destroyed and most backward, most dystopian, are the most arrogant about their existence, and the most
Yes,
supremacist, most they pretend to have everything best.
it might be. Now, one of the reasons definitely is that these two most involved in the freedom struggle. So it's only obvious that ever since 1947, they faced the brunt of some of the worst things. Even Bihar, for that matter, it's actually true. Bihar at that point was a part of the Bengal province. So Bihar, West Bengal, and Punjab actually faced the worst of the freedom struggle and partition and everything. Both of these states were partitioned, and there is a post-traumatic, persistent thing going on with that partition thing. There has been perennial problems in both the states which never could be solved.
Yeah, yeah, reasons
So
are
yeah,
there. The reasons for staying there isn't there. The reasons for starting off
yeah,
with a destroyed situation is there, which the South has never faced. Post-colonial families do not
very
have
true.
family structures. Even at least
Hmm.
Punjab still has big families and stuff because of their Green Revolution stuff. Bengal,
Hmm.
because of that Operation Borga horse shit, couldn't even get on that train. So post-colonial families remained broken up families in Bengal. And with broken up families, you can't generate wealth, take risks, and accumulate wealth over generations.
True. So, okay. So what else is there?
Let's
This
go to
is the
Maharashtra.
biggest problem. Now, last thing, Punjab
Acha.
as the agricultural
Yeah.
powerhouse apparently.
Flatline.
Arey bhai, no, it's basically 0%. Would you agree? Would you understand? It's 0%. Revenue expenditure is 14,000 crores and capital outlay is 65. उस 65 में से आधे तो आपके प्रोटेस्ट ऑर्गेनाइज करने में चले जाते होंगे फार्मर्स के, वही आपका कैपिटल है, पॉलिटिकल कैपिटल. तो I mean, how do you expect the state to turn around when the only portfolio obnoxiously and aggressively stick to and try to defend its honors is performing like this. Usme se bhi agriculture as it is perennially losing value, and you do not want to innovate. You do not even want to go through that cycle of, let's say, anything like hydroponics or stuff. वो भी आप नहीं करना चाहते. So probably only way this UP pre and post. Yes, UP, by the way, is the only state which has a revenue surplus of 68,000 crores, I guess.
And that
So, yeah,
happened
UP
after
Yogi.
Yogi came in, and not even because of generating a lot of wealth and stuff, because that hasn't really started. They've started having fun with it. They haven't seen the fruits of what they have been sowing. The fruits of the resultant fruit of the revenue surplus has come simply because of preventing leakages, just making it more efficient.
Yeah.
Simply that has made them revenues fucking surplus. So yeah, do a Yogi comparison and then let's go to Maharashtra.
So let's go to Uttar Pradesh. Uttar Pradesh and State Explorer of Uttar Pradesh. Yeah. Okay. Now simply look at this. Simply by looking at this, you'll figure out a lot of things. This is BSP. This is SP. This is BJP. One small dip, and then it went up like a horse shit, crazy state. Simply, so around 2005-6. So let's look at it era-wise. At the peak of BSP, the capital outlay was 25,000 crore for Uttar Pradesh. At the best of SP's time, it was 64,423 crores. At the best of BJP, it crossed 1 lakh crores. It is around 1.5 lakh crores. That is the capital outlay increase, simply what you get by solving leakages. By the way, this is the revenue deficit line. So under our guide, it is at a revenue surplus of around 22% now, which eventually is around 60,000 crore plus of revenue surplus. It has never been in such a huge revenue surplus. It was always eventually in a revenue surplus, but only of around 5 to 10%. Now it has reached 25%. And not to mention it, if you see the Delhi rupee for this particular state, you will understand it has always been ruled by central transfers, and a huge part comes from devolution. And devolution amount, UP always disproportionately received a high devolution amount simply because it was poor. That is how devolution principle by the Finance Commission works. But look at it, there has been no particular spike in devolution amounts or percentages after BJP came to power. So the state is more or less the same as it was previously. So it cannot be said that simply because they got more money from the center is because why they progressed. If you look at the central transfers, yes, there has been a slight increase. But with that slight increase, you do not reach a surplus of 60,000 crores. Is the larger point to be made. Okay, just a moment.
While Shrayan is
maybe
talking, Shrayan is not
maybe you can address a comment. Yeah, address a comment or two. I'll just be back.
Yeah. I'm not getting into that man versus woman debate. But if there are any comments regarding this topic, yeah, there was one, I think. Oh yeah, Rishabh. Yeah, I can't extend the stream today because I'm getting back to a healthier sleep cycle and stuff. The reason I was late today and the reason I could not announce this stream much earlier, 1 or 2 hours earlier, we had this planned with Shrayan, is because I learned cooking today. I cooked a full meal today after many years. The last time I cooked a full meal was for my home science examination. Yeah, go ahead, Shrayan.
Yeah. So that's what I was saying, that simply look at this. There has been no obstinate increase in the sorry, what did just happen? There has been no obstinate increase in anything whatsoever. In fact, if you see, let's remove the discretionary grants. Devolution has been almost the same as it has always been. If anything, there has been a dip in central transfers during that phase. So this is the line for the central transfers overall, including devolution and discretionary grants. And during 2018 to 19, the central transfers amount basically fell. And despite that, it has gained 68,000 crores. So do not buy that bullshit that it is simply because the central government is paying them all a heck lot of more money is because why they are coming up with a revenue surplus of 60,000 crores. It simply comes from good governance and stopping leakages. Okay, let's move to Maharashtra, I guess then. Okay, just a moment, and yeah, so that. Okay, so if we look at Uttar Pradesh's portfolio split as well. By the way, okay, maybe we'll have to discuss Uttar Pradesh on a different day because there is lots to cover. Okay. Uttar Pradesh is a very interesting case, and you will see why there is revenue expenditure in certain cases. There is capital expenditure in other cases. So basically, they also do certain things retrospectively, where they actually build the infrastructure first and then go about hiring people, and in certain cases do the opposite. Maharashtra, yeah. Okay, so Maharashtra in the State Explorer, and capital outlay in crores of Maharashtra, by the way, starts from 10,000 crores. And if you look at this axis, which I can zoom it a bit, look at how the capital outlay axis increases. It doesn't increase like normal mortal human beings. It increases from 10,000 crores to 20 to 30 to 40 to 50 to 60. So an increment of bulldozer rental capex or opex. So it always increases by around 10,000 crores, and capital outlay at 2005 2006 was 10,000 crores, and now it has reached 85,657 crores. 85,000 crores roughly, so almost a bit less than 1 lakh crore. And if we look at revenue deficit, so the only time they were in a huge revenue surplus was during the UPA, during under Congress, for part where they had 22% revenue surplus. But my entire premise is, or my entire point, or how I look at things is, for Odisha, I can understand why they are in a revenue surplus, because they cannot invest back that revenue surplus because of the cyclones. So it gets destroyed. For any other place, I don't want you to have a revenue surplus of such huge margins, even for UP. So, for example, even UP had the revenue surplus once, and then they started self-financing their other things and stuff for greater development. Maharashtra did this once, where they went for a revenue surplus of 22%, but then Maharashtra is all. This is before the post BJP. Yeah. Because those numbers we still don't have. Those numbers we might be having after maybe confirmed numbers we might be having after a couple of years. So simply, if you have in a state of Maharashtra revenue surplus of this amount, invest it back. I mean, there is no point of showing it as a decorative optics in your state when everything almost is sorted. But even then, being such a major state and having the financial capital of the country, the revenue deficits, even where they have been, has never really crossed 13% or 14% all that much, which is a minimal revenue deficit. The only time they had a revenue deficit higher than that was much earlier, around 20 years earlier. After that, they have maintained their revenue deficit very well, I would say. And occasionally, they have been revenue surplus a few times, but not as huge as this, which also is pretty meaningless. I don't know why they would have that much of a revenue surplus. Portfolio split. Okay, so for education. Now look, this is Maharashtra, guys. The financial capital of the country is in this state. It is one of the richest state, and even then, look at the education line. It is straighter than God knows what.
straighter than a high frequency wavelength.
Yeah, I would not go for any other enunciations or comparisons, but 0.5% capex intensity in the field of education are 91,647 crores of revenue expenditure and a capital outlay of 468 crores. Nearly 1 lakh crore of revenue expenditure in education and not even 500 crores of capital expenditure. So no wonder why education is
Since we are
an issue.
discussing incels, let's talk like incels for a while. Look at that straight line, that green line, my God. Even in Maharashtra, guys, look at that education expenditure line. That's to be an incel here. That's as straight as an erect penis, isn't it? So yeah, now back to non-incel things. Yes, go ahead, Shrayan.
Yes. Now, health. Again, the same thing. Still defendable because health at large is eventually when you come up with these social security schemes sector other than social security. So that is there. And you are paying insane amounts to people, but then that cannot be helped because honestly, private hospitals are something that needs to go a long way. You have to regulate private hospitals at some point, and the supply chain and other malpractices going on. That I guess no particular state in this country has still achieved. So I can understand why health is one particular sector or portfolio where every state is actually struggling with the capex versus revex percentages. And I think it's okay. I mean, public health infrastructure being invested upon, even in terms of capital, even in terms of human capital, is a fine decision, according to me. Although at some point this has to change as well. But and another thing is a lot of the things or developmental infrastructure happening under the health sector actually comes under the education sector for a weird reason, because all the aims are considered under the education portfolio. But as we have seen, वहाँ पे भी तो कुछ हो नहीं रहा education में, so I wonder. And another thing is a lot of it is directly sponsored by the state, not the states. That. So health, then we have water and sanitation. And water and sanitation, by the way, guys, is a place where Maharashtra never fails to screw, which is why you will see every random guy fidgeting and fudging about why BMC elections are not taking place half of the time. And even when they do, nothing good really comes off. So one rare place where you can actually attack Maharashtra is पानी तक नहीं दे पा रहे अपने भूखे नंगे बच्चों. And it is a place where they lag behind by a great margin actually. So if you see, the already existing infrastructure's maintenance costs you 8,532 crores and capital outlay is, by the way, 0 crores. So they're building basically nothing in that particular sector. And the thing is, when you build nothing in a particular sector, it's problematic simply because Maharashtra is a state where the economy is constantly expanding. A lot of cities are becoming industrialized very fast, very rapidly. It's not just Mumbai. Pune, even Satara for that matter, is actually coming up with good things. So when that happens, and you do not invest
Everything
in
except Eastern Maharashtra probably keeps on developing, right?
Settlement and urbanization.
Eastern Maharashtra is a huge lag.
Yeah, Eastern Maharashtra, that region is the huge lag. But Wapi, they're building other things like barracks and stuff. So let's see what happens. One can also say Eastern Maharashtra is the home of the integral humanism of India.
Oh.
Yeah, that is where you have the headquarters, the integral humanism masters.
Yeah.
Anyway,
They've probably had Maoist problems as there in the eastern parts of Maharashtra as well, because that's practically central India. Eastern Maharashtra is central India, so must be Maoist troubles as well.
Lagging with the Madhya Pradesh border and everything.
Yeah.
So that is there, I believe. Okay, so that and water and sanitation. So yeah, they actually now the problem with such a thing is if you are not expanding your infrastructure in water and sanitation, you are basically screwing up industrialization and urban planning in a certain fashion. So maybe you have developed the Maharashtra region, but you do not keep it expanding. The other surrounding cities, which are going to become the second or third Mumbai's, or important cities in their own rights, they are not exactly coming off as showing promise for capital investments or private investments or foreign investments. Because how would one person come over there, and if your water and sanitation problems are so bad, it is crude, then it would largely dip the possibilities of that.
Shrayan,
Housing and
then
yeah,
Maharashtra
yeah.
in this aspect is very, very screwed because Mumbai is, of course, driving all the growth. Mumbai also
Yeah.
has water problem, sanitation problem, and water logging problems as well. It's practically under the sea.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But
pretty much.
if rest of the Maharashtra is not even as developed, and then they are having these problems, therefore droughts and farmer suicides in Maharashtra.
Yeah, that explains a lot. And
Hmm.
it's not just that. Technically, the problem with Mumbai is that other places are not getting the opportunity to develop equally. And then there is this one place which is exponentially stronger. So the entire crowd is moving away from the surrounding regions to that one spot, which is why it is so
Yeah,
overcrowded, which is why this slum culture
yeah,
cannot be tackled, because
of
it's not
course.
just static, it's dynamically increasing as well. So no
Hmm.
matter whichever billionaire takes the charge of actually resettling these people, how do you do when you simply cannot disperse the crowd in terms of the surrounding regions? Look at the
Hmm.
population and stuff.
Yeah. Shrayan, is this doable? What the eye is saying here?
Okay, just let's check. Can we do a
Later
now
on, maybe.
Karnataka, Maharashtra
District data.
somehow? We do have district data, just that it is not with the CAG section. It is there
Oh,
elsewhere. It is.
oh.
It has to be scripted. It can be made. It has to be scraped on several websites, but the RBI report would not, or the CAG report would not particularly have these divisions over there.
Is that data trustworthy?
Yeah, it is. It is government data only, but
Okay,
from different other avenues. For example,
okay,
the day
okay.
we do the primary education podcast, we will have to look at district data. So there is something called the ASA data set, which takes into account the district data spendings in primary education and stuff, because there you do not have anything centrally or state managed. It shows you district to district investments and stuff. So that I have already started making. It's almost near completion. So there we'll have to compare it district wise, and then we maybe have to cap the districts in terms of the state's boundaries and have a better view of the state's condition.
Hmm,
That would be there. Acha, yeah. So housing and urban development, agriculture and allied sector. You see, one of the rare places where agriculture and allied sector has a capex intensity of 28 fucking percent, 21%, 28%, 9%, but ठीक है कभी कभी घटता भी है 13%, and it's around 5,000 crores, 3,406 crore, 5,300 crores. So rare state, a rare state where they're actually investing in agriculture through innovative techniques. All these exotic agricultural things they pull up in the Western Ghat region. In fact, if you visit Maharashtra, they will have all these, a very exquisite section of agriculture is there in the Western Ghat region. They will take you to all these factories for tourism and stuff where
yeah.
they are making exotic products. So that is there, which is very important. Now look at it. Which are these two states which are actually working in portfolios nobody pays attention to? Gujarat in education, Maharashtra in agriculture. The biggest takeover of education, Kerala and West Bengal are lagging behind and actively deteriorating in education. The biggest takeover of agriculture are there. Punjab is doing 0% capital investment in agriculture, which is why what you need is capitalism and rapid industrialization and revenue surpluses, and that is only how you can expect to tackle your social problems, not to distribution of existing resources.
Then, just for fun, we must take a look at Kerala as well after you're done with Maharashtra.
Okay, that's why we are asking today, because
Yeah,
we might exceed the time limit as well. But yeah, we'll do Kerala.
yeah.
Rural development. So yeah, the capital state of integral humanism obviously has to do something with rural development as well. Uh, so 14,052 crores, 2,556 crores. Now understand, anytime you say it's rural development and you have a high revenue expenditure, is basically capital development, because these amounts are basically given away to most of the people in those regions for building roads and stuff. So you will have all these yojanas, Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, or Pradhan Mantri that housing yojana. What is it called? Griha Yojana or something. Where basically these are predetermined amounts that have to be given to beneficiaries, but after those amounts are given to beneficiaries, they eventually expend or spend those things on building infrastructure for themselves in an individual capacity, but fine. So rural development. Irrigation and flood, once again, irrigation and flood is a region where they invest a good amount of 82%. So it is only weird that if they are investing so much in irrigation and flood, why is it so lagging behind in water and sanitation? Because they have not probably been able to link these two, whereby in irrigation you actually conserve water through dams, and then you can maybe redirect it in some way to places with water shortages and impure water. So I look at these two portfolios as pretty close by. They can be associated. They can be merged into a complex and what to say assisting system, complementary assisting system that they have not been able to achieve. Probably because one of the reasons is the disproportionate industrialization of some circles or some regions more than others, which is screwing up the distribution of population as well. And then you have energy. So yeah, energy also is one place where Maharashtra's capital expenditure is not that much. The revenue expenditure is pretty high, particularly because most of the energy requirements have already been met and already under investment. I mean, investment has been done long back, so they are renewing it year by year. But again, the fact that they are not being able to expand their energy sector is one of the reasons the other regions or the other smaller cities, up and coming cities, are not being able to industrialize with the same pace. So imagine two things like water and sanitation and energy compounding to hinder the progress of the surrounding regions. That probably is one of the reasons why Maharashtra still has not been able to excel to the extent of maybe 1.5 trillion economy alone. The day that happens, that would be achieved as well. And anyway, in terms of pure raw energy requirements, Maharashtra's requirements are far more than what has been procured, so they have to often outsource energy from several places. That industry and minerals, now industry to theek hai. This particular sector of industry minerals, they have not been able to do anything. You see, there is this capex intensity of 1% and 72 crores. This has nothing to do with the industry per se that we are talking about. That is under NCFC. And roads and bridges. Roads and bridges we are building. Okay, 36,000 crores of roads being built in Maharashtra. So, yeah, that. 36,000 crores of road and 8,252 crores of maintaining already built roads. And this, by the way, after they have already done all their industrialization previous than this graph begins. So for those that are not aware, you see, Maharashtra started off industrializing way ahead of Gujarat, almost by a margin of 10 to 12 years. And by the time Gopinath Munde, the then Home Minister of Maharashtra, actually solved the underworld problem significantly, after that it never looked back. So even the margin of development starts 10 years before this graph starts. And वहाँ पे already बहुत कुछ हो चुका था. उसके बाद this is probably the second and third loop where they're expanding their road infrastructure. So this is the third battery. मतलब they have already industrialized once and then once again and then once again in a three-layer fashion. And we are still struggling for that one great industrialization drive in West Bengal. So that. And let's move to the State Explorer to check out the factory NFCF. Yeah. So this starts off at meager 4,600 crores and reaches almost as high as 50,000 crores, randomly reaching 32,000 crores here and there, 8,000 crores, and then 32,000 crores again. So almost a parallel private economy of the size of the entire state of West Bengal. Revenue expenditure in electricity mean it is salaries and stuff of the corporation people. It is the subsidies and free electricity that is being given to most people. And then it is the bureaucrats who come up with weird plans to expand things and that never work out. All of that combined. Acha. So this is the scenario where they have a private economy of the size of West Bengal's normal budget. And there is another thing that is not every, you see in West Bengal, the factory NFCF is pretty low
compared to, sorry, in Maharashtra, the factory NFCF is pretty low compared to their economy size, simply because they do not need to build more factories. Factories ban chuki hai, or ban rahi hai, but a major bulk of factories have been built already, way before the graph starts. Now they have diverted their private economic investment to other places, and you see all these great things happening over there, simply in regions like, you know, refineries and stuff all are being built over there. By the way, the GDP of Mumbai, Kolkata, Bengal is higher than the GDP. Yeah, of course. It is what it is. So let's start with let's end with the greatest state of India, the most literate state of India, which has surpassed the success of Indus Valley civilization, Kerala. And then maybe we can wrap up. Kerala. Uh, so here is Kerala. And
I think for Andhra
a bunch
Pradesh,
of,
Delhi, and Kerala, we need a separate animal cruelty budget for these states as well, because these three states are obsessed with that stuff.
yeah, we need
Maybe
that, and
burying dogs
we
alive
need
budget.
or dog curry projects, cuisines.
That the Northeast would get a huge GDP boost.
No,
If we took
it
that
is
way.
pretty. In Kerala, though, it has what? Dog cruelty, elephant cruelty, human cruelty, common sense cruelty. Great places. They're going great places. Now, so this is the factory NFCF of industrialization, private industrialization. Never surpassed the 8,700 crores mark, which is still better than West Bengal. So, well,
The partition.
with the partition. Technically, who was it who said that Kerala is the place where in Malabar is where Jesus Christ's apostles arrived? So yeah, they blessed Kerala over there. That is there. They have this hybrid secular culture, which is taking them to new heights every day.
Yeah.
Uh, Now, capex share of budget. Okay, now look at this fun thing. Yeah, they do not even count it in multiples of 5 or 10. It's in multiple of 1. It is like the national number system. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 100% literacy star.
Fuck.
And
What
then
the fuck?
10 is what they touched, and they were like, no, it's too dirty. So the one time they crossed the 10% mark, it was by 0.004%, and they were like, never again. And they went back to 6%. And this, by the way, is overall, guys. This is including all portfolios combined. It's not in a particular portfolio. So that. And then we have a revenue deficit and a 10% revenue deficit record of 21 years, where the only time they came down to a revenue deficit of 6%, it was their best performance. Otherwise, they revolve around 22% to 12%. So 21 of 21 years in a revenue deficit. And what else do we have? Capital outlay growth percentage. Now, obviously, since they're tracing unitary method in terms of capital outlay, so their growth is pretty high, but the problem is that growth is simply from 3% to 4%. And compared to the relative size of the economy, it comes up as a 60% increase in capital outlay, although it might be eventually some 100 crores. And just that. And what else? Okay, social sector expenditure. Here, by the way, 48% social sector expenditure, 100% literacy, and then we have this. Pretty self-explanatory, and yeah. Okay, so here a few margin notes. Capital flows to water and sanitation 92%, staffs energy at 0%. So Kerala is competing in West Bengal with CPM era power cuts. why? Okay, so where Kerala builds versus pays, most capital intensive water and sanitation, which is understandable because you are at the coastline and you will have floods and other problems and saline water. So okay, roads and bridges 68%, least energy 0%, education 3%, highest literacy 3%. Okay, what was the comment that Rutwik made? I could not see. Not sure if this was covered, but no, we did not cover northeastern states, and we intend to have a separate discussion maybe on the hill states and northeastern states because they face certain amounts of similar challenges. So, in fact, the entire Seven Sisters, Assam and stuff, Assam, Meghalaya, Mizoram, all those states, and then we would have to cover the Uttar region as well and Madhya Pradesh
Yeah.
maybe. Madhya Pradesh is not a hill state, but to see what exactly is wrong with such a huge state that it is not being able
Hmm.
to make any significant achievement. So it's not a
Yeah.
one-day thing, obviously. It had to be continued
Yeah.
on another day as
Yeah,
well.
we'll do a separate stream for Northeast and Uttarakhand, Himachal, Kashmir, all the mountainous states. Some streams with specific guests from specific states, and one for just maybe southern states or something. No, no. What was the other thing we discussed? Odisha, and no,
Yeah.
Punjab, right? Which did we skip
Yeah.
because it's too long?
Uttar Pradesh. Uttar Pradesh has to be done on a separate
Uttar
day.
Pradesh, right. One yogi post yogi comparison and one for north mountainous regions and the separate ones. Yeah, we'll have to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So that the social sector expenditure is 48%. Now, I wonder. So basically, a lot of it is freebies were there. We even made primary education and everything free, and yet that seems to not work out because that primary education is not worth having, and then did not get employment. No human capital investment significantly that would actually upskill somebody, and then it goes south and south. I mean, what else would you want to check out? In every place you see Kerala. If we go to Kerala, okay, sorry, Kerala would be somewhere here now. It's pretty depressing all around. ठीक है. You look at these numbers in roads and bridges. 3,500 crore is the cap. उसके ऊपर ये लोग बना नहीं पा रहे roads and bridges में भी. Education में अच्छा, by the way, education in Kerala 2.9%, 1.5%. So actually they're deteriorating in education if you see that. If you see in terms of capital expenditure, and in fact there was this report that primary education in Kerala is a complete failed model and they're going south everything. So the number of people who are actually turning out literate also by the metrics of class 5 divisions are falling in Kerala. It has started happening right now. And remember, we had done it in the midday meal scheme discussion that the protein per capita is falling in Kerala. So, with all the beefs are.
How is that possible? Because people are simply becoming poorer, or what's going on?
Yeah, yes. What else?
Shit.
Yes, they simply
Wow.
do not have money to now eat non-veg food unless they
Yeah.
probably steal someone's cattle and make a sandwich out of it.
Oh,
Which
yeah.
would be blasphemous for me. I may get arrested for saying that they do those things instead of them getting arrested for doing those things.
Yeah, of
Ah,
course.
now health maybe same ही है. Just look at all these straight lines and you would understand.
Yeah.
Water and sanitation may they did something which was a 2000 crore investment capital outlay. Okay, ठीक है, good for them. Housing and urban development same, flat. Agriculture and aid sector flat. Although in Kerala you grow a lot of interesting things. Despite that, there is almost no capex investment. 13% is there, arguably better than most states actually. So, okay, and 28 crores, nearly 1,000 crore capital outlay for uh, agriculture sector is better than most other states, I would say. Something they're doing. Although one can argue that with Kerala's particular climate, a lot more can be done in that sector itself. Because
Yeah, at
if
least
you
if you
see,
legalize marijuana, then maybe their GDP growth rate will hit 20% with Kerala Gold.
yeah, not just marijuana, several other things. I get they grow all these in Munda region. They grow so many exotic stuff as well. So
Oh,
God
yeah.
knows what they're doing. Lots of
Heard,
coffee
heard.
and tea and everything and spices as well.
Yeah.
That
A
so that
PM
is also not
Ayahuasca
there.
Yojana would solve all these problems.
Yeah. And then there's rural development to care. ठीक है. Okay. It's almost
Even
the
that picked up
same.
only after 2018-19.
Yeah. Yeah. What serendipitous realization CPM had after that, I do not know. But okay.
कि
Energy, okay.
थोड़ा
Energy.
डेवलपमेंट का माहौल है, everyone is spending so much,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we have to spend.
Okay, energy. Energy is like 1.2 massive matter. 1.261% of capex intensity is energy is what would deliver Kerala and industrialize it and solve its financial problems forever, I'm sure. Industrial minerals. Okay, industrial minerals is where they have actually worked. Kudos to them for that. And that, in fact, is the
Nice.
most important and the up and coming sector in Kerala. This is where they have the highest capital infrastructure development. That is 41.3%, which is pretty great actually. Because for most states, industry and minerals are far lagging behind. Kerala is
Yeah.
one place which they have worked really well for that. And then we have roads and bridges, जो कि मतलब पूरे भारत में apparently that is the one thing that is common and that is happening. Everyone is building roads like crazy. वहाँ पे they have a 3,200 crores outlay now, which has exceeded the revenue expenditure. Although one might always question, and it is what wondering, not just for Kerala, not just I'm targeting it particularly, but if your revenue expenditure and capital expenditure are similar in terms of roads and bridges, it simply means that you are building bad roads, which needs too much maintenance. So instead, you simply need to build more durable roads, because you see in certain states, for example, in Gujarat and Maharashtra, we saw that the capex is much higher than revenue expenditure. So if you are having to keep such high revenue expenditures in terms of roads, maybe you consider it your primary source of employment, like Action Neeraj in West Bengal, or you are simply building bad quality roads which get withered away of every small thing that happens, and you need to build it all over again and repair it. That
So
can
that
be the
people are
only
employed.
possible.
Developmental economics.
ठीक है, मतलब. Okay,
Remember
that
what
is
Abhijit
you want.
Banerjee said. Unemployment has its social consequences. Poor people will kill you if you don't give them money. So give them free stuff and make them work for 100 days on the same stuff over and over.
Okay, now let us have a last look at Kerala and its this thing. And this is primarily because now the central government is so fed up of Kerala and its revenue deficits, they have actually stopped central transfers as well, which I discussed in the one of the last streams as well, that they went to Kerala High. In fact, Kerala government went to the High Court and then the Supreme Court against the central government that ये हमें पैसे नहीं दे रहा है, and the central government strictly said, if you are not going to adhere to the norms of fiscal conservation ever, we are not giving you that money. So that's the thing. Even West Bengal was building something in terms of roads and bridges, maybe bad quality or whatever. Kerala was not even doing that sufficiently. So they simply refused, and that case is still pending in Supreme Court, I believe.
So their picturesque spots are going to get a little sacrificed with all the expenditure on minerals and stuff. They can't be proud of their nature anymore, I guess, in the next 20 years.
No, they cannot. And the last thing that we need to discuss probably, so this is Kerala summed up. And that party head to head. Now look at this. We can include all the parties that there are. सब पार्टी में बुला लेते हैं.
क्या बात.
TDP, YSRCP, SP, AIADMK, DMK, BRS, SHS. What is one is SHS? I don't even know. Is it Shiv Sena? Okay, probably, yeah. BJD, JDU, AAP, CPM, Trinamool, INC, BJP, and who has the highest share of capex? And turns out it's the BJP, who are only behind SP and BSP.
Adjusted for inflation.
Adjusted for inflation, and see the number of state years. So SP is 8, BSP is 5 during this thing. Okay. So even if you do an average of the worst states that BJP rules and the best, even then they are this high. Okay, that's the point I'm trying to make. In one state versus in states with 180 state years, the average capex share is 16.8%, and the years in revenue deficit is 34%. So look at the head-to-head of the two largest parties. Okay, we rule for a similar period. That's what I'm trying to make. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Right, right.
Look at INC, 180, 183. So equally, almost equal. If anything, INC has ruled more during this tenure.
Hmm.
And they have ruled in more states as well. And yet,
Hmm.
in capex share, BJP actually surpasses INC by 1.8%. In Revex
Hmm.
growth, they're below INC, which basically means that they have given less freebies and done more privatization, targeted privatization. Even in terms of revenue deficit, INC is at a higher revenue deficit. And even in here, clearly, just look at the private investor confidence under BJP and INC, plus 0.08 under the BJP and minus 0.05 under the INC. But after all these people are cronies, na? इनके पार्टियों में तो मोदी जी नाचते हैं, so okay. Across all these states, even before Modi ji was a somebody, बीजेपी के जितने भी लोग थे उन सब इनके ही पार्टियों में नाच रहे थे. So well, that is that. And TMC, by the way, despite ruling for 15 years, is at the least of that ledger, that particular sector. Only next to, who is this? YSRCP, okay, ठीक है. And CPM is also pretty low, so we got the worst of every world possible. And
Yeah, yeah.
there we are. There we have land. Now, if you see the other factors, okay, so this is factory NCFC. Okay. Private investments under different parties. For BJP, it is 0.075. Now, look at these parties, SHS, which is Shiv Sena.
At Zoomcore.
Under them, we had a massive boom in private investments. We had the same for BRS, which in fact is why pretty much BRS was voted out of power. They kept on investing and investing and investing without any fiscal accountability. And they took more loans and stuff and they invested it back as well without getting the results. So at some point, it became one-sided investment without getting the ROI, and which is why they got voted out. So that is BRS, SHS. DMK obviously has private investments. In fact, the entire thing against NEET is coming from DMK, no? Because they have even privatized the colleges. सारे college भी privatized है, and once you abolish NEET and stuff, then you give a lot of leeway to these people. So that is that.
Yeah, but alcohol is state.
Yeah. And who are the worst? Obviously, AIADMK is pretty bad when it comes to private investment. So is SP, so is BSP, so is
Wow.
TDP for some reason, I don't know why. And then there is our beloved Pure and Pious.
Why is TDP with these people?
That even I am not sure. I guess, and this has been a thing for a while now. TDP seems to be doing all the right things, but eventually they never get the ROI. Even in other
I guess
metrics,
they do only they only do the cool stuff that will get attention, I think. Therefore, we think that they are doing way more than they actually are.
I guess so. Because even on one of the, when I was checking the metrics of Andhra, they are lagging behind in a lot of things.
I see.
Not up to the mark, not what we would expect from the most capitalist party that there is in India.
Hence so much
Also,
conversion, no?
Yeah, maybe that.
Hence so much
So, yeah,
massive
that
conversion in Andhra.
That is that. And if you see a Freebie signature, okay, so there is other stuff as well. Maybe we can discuss it someday. Revenue deficit. Even in revenue deficit, BJP is one of the consistent revenue surplus states. They keep on performing well. So is INC. The highest revenue deficit is, of course, belonging to YSRCP and our Pure and Pious Didi. Look at it. On a national basis, we are at the worst end of
Wow.
revenue deficit. Even CPIM, which is in 2 or 3 states, Tripura, it is not
Wow.
there anymore. They have performed much better than this lady. So, yeah. So that and freebie signature, well, this we'll have to discuss some other day maybe. And for every party, if you see the freebie signature, you will see it is just before elections that they do not promise freebies. Before elections, they always make huge capital investments and get their flagship projects completed. Okay. So capex only increases before elections. And since they get all these projects completed, it is basically, there's a very famous paper on it called the ribbon effect in Indian politics. You can go and study it, where they make all the projects completed only before elections, and during elections they announce freebies. So after elections for the next 2-3 years, the capex goes south because the capex goes high because the social sector spending goes pretty high to keep election promises. So yeah, that is that. Probably that is all we can discuss today. If we have to discuss more, that
Yeah.
would be too
Yeah,
much.
no, we won't be able to retain anything anyway. And then Indians obviously have a problem with long live streams, apparently. People keep telling me, do 15-minute videos, 20-minute. And people keep saying, do 40-minute, 45-minute podcasts. Who will watch that long stuff? Who watches longer than 1 hour podcasts? Nobody watches more longer than 1 hour podcasts in the whole world.
Which
And
is why you are where you are.
yeah.
Which is pretty much why you are where you are.
And by the way, I had to respond to something. I can't remember what. There was stuff about my diet and stuff. Oh yeah, the Vanguard thing. People who want to join Vanguard. Yeah. So every now and then, over like in 1 or 2 weeks, over 1 or 2 months, some people send some like applications and stuff. I'm not looking at my mail all that much. I'm thinking I'll sit one day and take everybody's mails and inculcate them. But most people refuse to have a public profile on social media and do debates. If you don't do that, what's even the point? This is not a just wow, Muslims suck, that kind of a WhatsApp group. I know, Ludwig, you are not going to do just that. But yeah, online debates and all. Yeah, you are doing everything with from your public profile anyway. So yeah, you are completely welcome. I'm just I have just haven't looked at the mail for mails asking to join the Vanguard as of now. Chat link. No, not today. Well, I need to end the live stream and go to sleep as soon as possible. But yeah, it's 3 hours already, and that means already Indians think this is too long, because Indians for some reason think that YouTube doesn't have a cursor button, or it doesn't start exactly from where you watched the previous day. They think if it's more than 45 minutes, how will I watch this particular video in one sitting? You don't have to watch a video in one sitting on YouTube, dear Indians. This is not 300 BC. This is not. I know you like ancient India, but you don't live in ancient India. You can pause, you can resume, guys, on YouTube. It works. Social media, mouse, digital internet, all of that works. E20 discussion, I don't know. Someday, maybe with Ludwig. You should simulcast on Twitch. There are no Indians on Twitch. Although you would probably need a paid account on Twitch as well. So later on. Oh yeah, there's something else I wanted to respond to. Dia or somebody else was talking about the judiciary when you all were discussing the incels, that things need to be sped up, judiciary needs to be quicker, etc. And right now I do not have money for StreamYard subscription. After this subscription goes away, I'll be back to OBS, and I don't have money for what else we were discussing. Yeah, anything right now, because first of all, I'm going on spending money on my legal battles. Guess the two insane things that happened to me in just the last 1 week. The molestation case against me that I'm appealing to be quashed in the Calcutta High Court has gotten out of the list now. It's gotten delisted now because I wasn't paying money to re-enlist my name and put it ahead of everyone. I paid that money once. I did not have money to do that repeatedly. Everybody else does that repeatedly every other day. And so my quashing is probably not going to happen in the next 2, 3, 4 years now, unless I pay the fuck up. And my case against my attackers, which is basically an FIR modification case, because on the day of the event, I did not have a good lawyer. I stumbled upon a random lawyer who made up a bullshit FIR just to be. Yeah, Shrayan is leaving. Yeah, bye bye, Shrayan. Yeah, I'll leave in 5 minutes.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks, Shrayan. Yeah, see you soon.
Yeah.
And then that night's FIR was very incompetent because that lawyer wanted to settle things amicably, and in order to settle things, he had this genius Gandhian idea of putting weak cases against them, hoping that they would also put weak cases against me, which did not happen. So now I'm simply trying to modify the FIR in the first place, which is going on since August of last year. It's August of this year already. And right before the elections, there was the last hearing looking at all my evidences, and the police station back then, not surprisingly, gave the report that there's nothing to modify, no names to add, no sections to add. Luckily, they did not give an FRT, which is a final report. If they had given an FRT, that would mean the case is closed there. It would not go further. So after the elections, I filed a Naraji petition that I'm not happy, I'm not razi with this investigation. I want more investigation. The next hearing for that was on 3rd August. That whether the investigation will go on further or not, or whether even the judge thinks that, yeah, it's not required. There has been enough investigation and there is legitimately nothing more to look at. On that day's hearing, there was some puja in the lower court. So I had a part hearing because the judge only listened to why we are filing an RG petition, just heard some points and then got up and left because he had to attend a puja. And so that day's hearing money, not just of me, everybody else has got wasted. And the next hearing is in November, when again we will start to look at evidence, and one evidence per hearing, guys, approximately. So like screenshots on one day, video on one day, health certificate on one day. And my attackers are therefore chilling because BJP is not allowed to beat them up, and they think their local Trinamool councillor is joining BJP, allegedly. That's kind of the word on the street here. And he'll join BJP in exchange of a bunch of money. And after he joins BJP and becomes a councillor again in December, in a different ward although, they are not going to have any trouble anymore, and maybe in fact push me to let go of all the cases without any compensation. That's their hope, which is not going to happen. But yeah, that's the scene. And all this, spending close to 5 lakh rupees on these two cases, one defending myself and one against them. I have not seen an ounce of justice. There's nothing remotely resembling justice with justice in terms of at least my attackers having felt some ounce of fear or stress at least. Even that has not happened. They are going on chilling. The only fear they felt was 4th May to 8th, 9th May, by the time when they realized that, okay, BJP is not going to even attack us or take away our party offices. And this guy is not hiring any goons to beat us up. He's spending all his money on lawyers anyway. Therefore, let's just chill. Let's wait for our councillor to get into BJP. Lol. So on that happy note, thanks a lot for joining this live stream, guys. Hope to see you all soon. And especially in the discussions surrounding these states with the help of this brilliant ledger by Shrayan. Hope a statue is built of him where crows poop on his head. Bye-bye, guys. Good night.
Sani pagare sani sa gari gama bama gama sani pagare sani sa gari gama gari gari sani sani sa sani gama gari gari sani sani sa pani sa gari sani pani sani pama pani sa gari sani pama pani sani sani pani sa ni pa gari sani sa gari gama